Good morning, everybody, and you're all very welcome to the National Seminar Series 2014-15. And this one, the webinar, is hosted from IT Tralee, and it involves members of the Southern Cluster, which is Carlow IT, Cork IT, Waterford IT, University College Cork, and ourselves here in the sunny southwest. I just take it, so well, not quite so sunny this morning. As you can see here, for those who may or may not be familiar with Blackboard Collaborate, just one or two features here. We have enabled the chat box function down in the bottom left. So if you want to contribute or take part, we really would encourage, it's very much as an interactive webinar, and it's important that we get feedback from everybody participant, not just the presenters. It genuinely is going to be a very interactive, participatory seminar this morning. So as I said, you simply type in and just hit the return, and you'll be able to, and what I'll be doing is I'll be moderating those discussions and putting them to the presenters as we go along. Just one or 2 points to note. This is being recorded, and it will be made available to the National Forum on their website. So I suppose just to bear that in mind, anything that you write or say or type in as the day goes on. So I suppose that's just one thing. Another thing is, during the day there will be 3 videos which will be shown, and the aim should be that they should work out, but I suppose sometimes with people's browsers things may not work out slightly correctly. So at the same time, we will also be putting up a link in the chat box where you can copy that and open that in a new tab if you wish to watch the video at that particular time. Excuse me. So just to, so if people are happy with that, I suppose just one or two things. As I said, it is part of the National Forum for Teaching and Learning, and their whole team was all about transitions, a number of transitions, and the transitions we're looking at here is into higher education. I suppose that we all want to be sure that what we're doing is effective and efficient transition initiatives. I suppose I mean, the sort of questions there. What's being done, and how can we know how effective it is? I suppose in this day and age, we want to be sure that we are using our money wisely, both the state money and perhaps as people are actually funding college, maybe as parents or as partners, whatever like that. And we want to be sure, we want to be happy that we want to be happy that the money is being spent effectively and efficiently, and we want to know that things are happening right. So in that case here, then that I just want some questions that we just might want to ponder. So what actually is good practice? And I think during today we will actually be drawing upon a number of examples of what we are suggesting are good practice, and then what works. And we're not saying that everybody's going to be an expert or everything like that, but we're just trying to offer some idea of transitions which have worked and which can offer other colleges and other providers something to consider like that. And then the final point of what are the challenges to measuring effectiveness and efficiency. So I suppose one of the things that we're often to the face with is to try and think about what are we doing? How do we know we're doing a good job, and how do we actually measure it? We might sort of intuitively or instinctively know, and a number of our presenters, and particularly Sean O'Reilly, our second keynote speaker, will be offering some ideas about how this might be achieved, or how we might actually utilise some of the data being currently generated that might actually help inform our effective and efficient teaching practice. So with that, as I said, our first keynote speaker is coming all the way from Yorkshire, and I just noticed from, and we'd just actually like to welcome Liz, and you're very welcome this morning. And just actually, in fact, to welcome a lot of people. Just looking down here at the sheet of participants, Just here at the sheet of participants, we have people here from Chester, from Edge Hill University. So I think we've 19 participants registered from the UK, and one person from Australia as well. So I thought that Kerry was quite remote, but obviously we're quite a long way off. So as I said, just myself this morning, just introducing myself, and just to reiterate again, I really would encourage people to use the chat room, to use the chat box, and to pose questions. I will be moderating as we go along like that. From 9:40 to 10, we'll have challenges in evaluation of transition and engagement initiatives, and that's from Liz Thomas, from Liz Thomas Associates, who's based in Yorkshire. From 10 o'clock until 10:20 then, it'll be insights into the ISI student engagement findings that may inform transition initiatives. And I think this is very, very important here that, as I said, Liz is going to pose some questions and challenges, and then how might we use some quantitative data to actually capture that. We then have a number of our partners from the Southern Cluster, to be Diarmuid O'Shea and Anne Carpenter from IT Carlow. Then 10:35, then evidence-based transition, another colleague, Noreen Daly at UCC, Maurice Birmingham at CIT, and then Laura Keane at WIT. And then, as I said, towards the end then, we'll have an opportunity then just sort of roundtable the discussion and sort of pulling together the material, obviously seeing how the time runs over or whatever like that. But as I said, Linda, I'd just like to welcome you from Bristol. Thank you very much for coming in. And actually, if anybody else, it's hard for me to get a sense, or maybe if people are just chatting, or you might just want to put in the chat room, actually just tell me where you're logging in from, just to maybe create a bit of a buzz in the community here this morning. So as I said, the discussion and capture of outcomes from the webinar will be a very useful session here, but as I said, it really will be effective if people sort of get involved and pose those questions. I will be sort of moderating them, and then hopefully then we will close then at 12 o'clock. So as I said, I'm being ably assisted here by my colleague Tony Murphy. I suppose I'm sort of like the presenter this morning, and Tony will be the producer. So he'll sort of be bringing people in and out, launching the videos and making sure everything runs. I actually have the easy job. I'm just basically just a talking head this morning. So can we just check now if, Liz, are you there and live from, I feel a bit like the Eurovision Song Contest here, sort of calling people in. Is the Yorkshire jury there? Nottingham Trent, Zoe, you're very, very welcome. Actually, I'll be over there for the Ashes in August. So we have Liz's presentation, and we're just going to check now if Liz is with us. Hello, Liz. Don't forget to click on your talk button just below the image. Yes. So, Louise, you're very welcome.
Hello.
Liz.
Can you hear me?
Hi.
Good morning.
We can hear you. So, Liz, good morning. I'm going to hand over to you now, Liz. All the best.
Thank you very much. Well, thank you, and this is the first time I've done a webinar, so I'm really hoping that this works well. And I've got 20 minutes to rush through a whole set of things to do with transition, and particularly about evaluation. But I have retitled it slightly to not be quite so negative this morning, to talk about those opportunities as well as the challenges in relation to the evaluation of transition and engagement initiatives. What I want to do is to just briefly recap what we know about transition, and then to think about the role of evaluation in developing the student experience, and then to think about the evaluation approach that could be used, and by looking at a sort of a logic chain and indicators, and then to conclude with some of those opportunities and challenges as a summary. As I say, this is a huge amount to get through in about 15 or 20 minutes, but I think we'll have a little bit of time at the end to discuss, and obviously really happy to come back about any points either during this session today or subsequently. So, I don't know if this bit's going to work, because when we trialled it on Monday it didn't work, but I just want to kind of give a sense of why transition is challenging. We all know it's challenging because we work in the area. But I just wanted to tell you about a little story. I was going on a car journey with my daughter, who's the one there on the bicycle, and she said, "Mummy, we're going to do maths." And I was thinking, oh, I was struggling with the road system, which had changed as usual. And she asked me these questions, and she said, "So what's 38 plus 8? And I said, well, that's easy, that's 46. And she said, no, Mummy. I said, yes, it is. And she said, no, you're wrong. It's my maths. It's different, Mummy. Just try another one, Mummy. You'll get it right. And she gave me these questions, and I really couldn't find the answers. And the point is that that's sometimes what it's like when you come into higher education. You think you know how to do things, and then everything changes. And eventually she was able to explain to me how her math system worked. And I'm not sure whether anyone else has got this, but we did have an explanation from Hannah here about her own math system. I've just got a white screen though. I don't know about anyone else. Oh, it's coming up to YouTube. This is where our technology might work. So here's Hannah's maths class sheet. So she asked me these questions, and you can see if you can get them right. So by the end of this, I was hugely frustrated. And, oh, have we got her explanation? And she said, well, the thing is, Mummy, what you have to do is you have to round the number to the nearest 10 before you add it to the number, so the units always stay the same. And then it's really easy. The point being that if you know what to do, it's easy, but if you don't know what to do, it's hugely frustrating. And I think that's really what it's like for students when they come into higher education. A lot of the learning they've done in their previous education is no longer relevant or doesn't seem to make sense. But we all know what to do about how to improve transition. We have lots and lots of research and evidence about what makes a transition initiative effective. So, for example, if I was talking to you today about how to improve transition, we'd be talking about things about providing information to help ensure good decision making, helping students to have better or more informed expectations to help them fit in with the reality of what they experience when they come into higher education. We'll be talking about developing their academic skills to help them with that academic transition around learning. We'll be talking about building social capital and networks and relations with peers and staff to promote their integration socially into the higher education institution. And we'll be talking about nurturing their confidence, engagements and belonging to improve their retention and success in higher education. And I'm going to assume today that we know much of that information, but rather we want to move from understanding what to do to actually implementing that change. And Vincent Tinto said, most institutions have not yet been able to translate what we know about student retention into forms of action that have led to substantial gains in student persistence and graduation. And I think the same is very true for transition. We know what to do. What we find difficult is actually making it happen, because it's not just about you or I knowing what to do. It's about people across the whole institution doing things differently. Not necessarily about doing more, but doing things differently. And what I want to argue in this presentation is that evidence and evaluation are absolutely crucial to the process of change and underpin change. So we can use evidence and evaluation to inform our thinking. So by reviewing our internal and external evidence to think about what we need to do. We then need to think about the changes and plan the changes we want to make. We then implement change, and then we monitor and evaluate the changes we've made and feed that information back through into the process. So there are a number of ways in which we can use our evidence and evaluation to bring about change, and I just want to spend a few minutes thinking about these. We can use evidence to think about where and how to intervene. We can use evidence to understand what's working and why, and how we can improve the student experience further. We can crucially, I think, use evidence to engage staff and senior managers. And we can also use evidence to make the case for increased financial support to take our work forward, so we move beyond sort of smaller projects to much more wide-ranging institutional change. So, drawing on some kind of work I'm doing at the moment with institutions, I just want to kind of illustrate some of these issues. So we can use evidence to find out where to intervene. So one member of staff said, looking at the data, a number of areas where the data was showing there'd been some challenges in the non-continuation data, I suppose. So in this institution, that's where they chose to put their effort into subject areas where there'd been some challenges, that the non-continuation data was worse than in other subject areas. But it also helps you to understand how to intervene, and this is about thinking about what you need to do in those particular instances. So all teams were sent statistics on how their courses were performing and how the first few modules were performing and the retention stats and so on. So we told them that was their baseline. We gave them all of the evidence about effective practice, and we asked them to almost evaluate where they were, what was their starting point, and what they were going to do. So you can use the literature, you can use existing practice from your own institution about what's been working. You can also use that to kind of understand and improve the student experience. And so someone commented, part of our keenness to involved in this program is about the evaluation side of it. That was really attractive, I think. It's what's been missing nationally for, well, a long time. It's really hard to, there are lots of good ideas and good practice, but that was kind of appealing. So we could then go out to the different other schools that weren't involved and say, we've tried this in this area and it's worked, or it seems to have worked, and we've got some hard evidence in it. There is something to think about in your area as well. So this idea that you have some evidence about what's working, and then you can start to use it in other parts of the institution. And that, I think, connects very much to the issue of engaging staff and all the work I do with institutions about bringing about change, improving retention or transition or whatever, any aspect of the student experience. The ongoing challenge is always to engage other staff beyond the enthusiasts. So engaging staff remains a significant challenge, and reaching a wider group of staff beyond those immediately involved remains difficult. None of the strategies tried so far have achieved significant involvement from a wide range of staff, they said in one institution. But then I think that's where the evidence comes in. So discussion with all staff to involve them in the project and the decisions on interventions, obvious input of our students to be able to provide evidence for the strategies we're proposing as being of benefit to the students, trying interventions that some staff were reserved about, finding it have a positive effect on students has led to improved engagement for ongoing work. And I think that's really true, that the most powerful way of getting colleagues involved is to show them that it makes a difference to the student experience and to the student outcomes. And indeed, the same is true in terms of senior managers. So at the senior level, the institution must take responsibility for the work that's taken forward, and that includes the use of data to underpin student retention and success. And other people talked about using the evidence to help the staff to see how it had made a difference, to help the senior managers see that it had made a difference. And finally, I just wanted to kind of draw attention to this idea about using the evidence to make the case for financial support. So this is an example from the US about Paul Smith College, which is a small liberal arts college, and they introduced an electronic warning flag system that identifies students who look like they might be at risk of withdrawing and so need some sort of support to improve their engagement. And their evaluation was able to demonstrate that for their evaluation showed a $750,000 return on an initial investment of $100,000, and that was really through improved student retention and completion. And that was really powerful in them in taking their further work forward, that they secured further financial support from their board. And I think these are all the ways that evaluation helps us to take our work forward. It moves from us having good ideas that we know are effective in improving our student experience to actually helping to bring about widespread institutional change. But I think that brings us to the real challenge, which I want to tackle in the next 10 minutes, which is thinking about evaluation and this idea that it's really hard to do. And I think in all the work that I do, this is always the bit where we do sort of scratch our heads from time to time, and it's kind of easier to think about in the abstract and much more difficult to put into practice in reality. So I want to kind of use a real world example to try and illustrate this. So this is the What Works with Student Retention and Success Change Program. Now in the first phase of this work, we were answering the what question. So what do we need to do to improve student retention? And in the second phase, we're answering the how question. How do we actually implement this change across institutions? So this is a project or program of work then that's involving 13 institutions across the UK, and they're implementing changes, and crucially we're trying to evaluate the process and the outputs and the impacts of change. So the aim of our evaluation is both looking at the effectiveness and the impact of the changes and the process of change, and then feeding that information back into the work of the institutions. And what we're doing is therefore drawing on a whole range of data. We're trying not to increase the workload hugely, so we're drawing on naturally occurring data as well as some data which is being collected specifically for this program of work. So this is a kind of very quick overview, and I don't want to spend too much time on this, but to say that we had huge discussions at program level about the evaluation design that we would use. And we were under quite a lot of pressure to look at doing an experimental design, but which would have allowed us to implement one or two small changes and then evaluate the impact. But it would have been extremely hard to do in an HE context, where there's changes in the outside world about the environment of higher education, and also there's lots of other things happening, so you wouldn't have a pure experimental design conditions. So we've opted for a mixed method, what we've called kind of in quote marks action research evaluation strategy. So as we find things out, we're feeding it back into the process of change rather than just coming up with the results at the end. What I want to draw attention to here is that we're drawing on a range of methods to make this work. So we're looking at institutional data. So I can show this to you. Can I? Whoops, I was hoping to use my pointers. Never mind. If you look at the bottom line, the orange line there, you can see the institutional data, the student survey data, where we've been scrutinizing plans and we've been interviewing people and we've been conducting surveys. So there's a whole range of ways that we've been combining data to help us to answer our key evaluation questions. But I think the thing that's really important to think about, and which is quite hard to do in relation to any of our work we do around retention or transition, is to think about the anticipated causal relationship. So what it is that we actually want to do. So the first column here, it talks about interventions. And so we all put in place interventions. And we expect them, in this case, to improve our retention and success. But what are the steps that we anticipate between our interventions and our improved retention and success? And in this case, we expect our interventions to improve engagement and belonging, as that was a key finding from the research that we're trying to implement. But there's a step here which is missing between the interventions and the improved engagement and belonging and the improved retention and success. And you put in place interventions because you expect something to happen. You expect changes in attitudes or behavior. So, for example, in the institutions I'm working with here, a lot of people talked about making institutional data available as they thought that this would contribute to improving retention and success. But if you simply make data available, it doesn't directly improve retention and success. There's a step here which is about staff being able to use that data and use it in a particular way which they haven't previously been able to do or been willing to do. And similarly, with transition activities, you put in place some activities and you think they're going to have some benefits. They might, for example, be contributing to improving your student retention and success. And how do you see that logic chain working through here? And it's about working through what it is you want to happen. So in this example, the transition activities could be designed to help students make more friends, and this helps students to feel like they're more engaged and belong to the institution, and this in turn improves your retention and success. And once you've established your logic chain, you're much more able to evaluate the effectiveness of your interventions at the different steps. There are, of course, unintended consequences which you might find during the course of your intervention and your evaluation, and that's fine. So once you've started to establish your logic between the activities you deliver, the changes in attitude and behavior, the fact that that leads to engagement and belonging, and that leads to improved retention and success, you then need to start thinking about your evaluation methods and your evaluation indicators. So, for example, it's always quite easy to see whether or not your activities have been delivered. You can monitor and observe them, and you might simply then record the number of activities that were delivered, and we're all fairly familiar with that. But then you've also got to think about how you might look at changes in attitudes or behavior. And often that's quite qualitative. That's about staff or student feedback, for example. In the example of the What Works program, we're looking at how students are engaged and belong. So we've got an engagement and belonging survey, and we're also looking at our final indicators of being about improved retention and improved attainment, and we're looking at institutional data to do that. And we can then create here in this final bottom row specific indicators relating to each of those stages in the logic chain. So we can look at the number of activities that are delivered, the quantity or quality of the change that students or staff report, the levels of increased engagement and belonging that students report through the survey tool, and the percentage change in specific indicators. I'm not sure whether you're all with me, and I did warn you this is quite a lot to go through in 20 minutes. However, this example has gone a bit strange, but hopefully will help to explain it to you slightly more explicitly. So this is an example of transition, and you can't see it there very well here, but this is a real-world example, and so it's kind of got warts and all. But one particular discipline area decided to introduce their introduction activities and their academic skills activities into a core research module that all students had to take at the start of their first year experience. And they anticipated that this would lead to students having better expectations and understandings about studying in higher education, and also better academic skills to enable them to be successful. And they thought that in turn this would improve students' confidence, it would also make them more capable to be successful, and it would improve their engagement as they felt much more part of their program of study. And this in turn they hypothesized would lead to an improvement in student retention and success. So how can we prove, what are the research methods that we might use to find out whether or not this was integrated, whether their transition activities were integrated into the core module? That's quite easy. For example, you might look at the module handbook or something like that. And similarly, how might you find out whether the expectations and skills of students have improved? And in this case, they decided to use staff feedback and the module evaluation, so that was naturally occurring data that they chose to use. But how might you find out if students are feeling more confident, if they're feeling more capable, and they're more engaged? And here they chose to use staff and student feedback, and also data about assessment. And then how does that improve retention and success? Well, again, they looked at their institutional data. So they looked at, to go to this bottom row, they looked at the number of sessions delivered. They looked at the extent to which staff and students reported an improvement in students' expectations and academic skills. They looked at students' attendance and their engagement in the modules, and they looked then at their attainment and their continuation rates. And of course, they were also open to the possibility of unintended consequences. I'm going to run over by a couple of minutes just to kind of give this as an example, which I hope is all right. So this is what happened in reality. The delivery of the induction information and academic literacy took place throughout the core module, so that took place as planned. The module was really effective based on feedback from staff and module evaluations from students. They said it was very useful. So you can see that these indicators could be improved, but this is what they've reported so far. Attendance was excellent because there were 5 formative tasks that had to be handed in during the sessions, so attendance for these sessions improved. And crucially, the pass rate was pleasing. Only 30 out of 278 registered students failed the module. That's 10.8%, which is improvement on previously. And the continuation rate, that's for continuing from level 1 to level 2, improved from 84% to 91%. But there were some kind of unintended consequences or some additional feedback that they collected. The smaller groups generally worked well, but some students complained about the inconsistency between the groups. So the staff team are looking at addressing this. And staff reported improved standards of work in other modules on the whole, but some students didn't transfer what they'd learnt from this particular introductory research module to the other modules they were studying. So again, there was some further work to be done about thinking about how you might improve the transition of all students and extend their learning from one module into other modules. So in the whistle-stop tour, I hope that you've been able to see that there are opportunities and challenges for the use of evidence and evaluation to inform your transition work and take it from project to a much more embedded institutional-wide approach to improving the student experience. So the opportunities include moving from knowing what to do to actually implementing change, using evidence and evaluation to support and improve the process of change. I think we should think about the opportunities to use naturally occurring data and information, otherwise our jobs turn from practitioners into data collectors and researchers, which is clearly not the aim. And it provides the opportunity to demonstrate the value of the work we do to students in the institution and indeed receive recognition for the work that we do. But there are clearly challenges too. It is about prioritising and finding time to do the work. It is about agreeing the research design, and that can be extremely challenging. And then the bit that I think people often get stuck with is around clarifying the indicators and the research methodology, and then designing the research tool. But I think that shows to the opportunities for collaboration in your network that might help to make some of that work easier. And then clearly there are challenges around collecting and analysing the data and indeed making sense of it. And finally, our huge challenge is using that evidence to really make a difference and improve the student experience. Thank you very much for listening, and I hope it made sense to you. It's quite strange not being able to see audience responses.
Liz, thanks very, very much, and you've done very, very well. And in fairness, you get through an awful lot of material there, and I've been sort of furiously making notes. And I think I love the idea of sort of the way you have the chain. I think that works very well, you know, moving across each row. So that certainly made clear sense, and I think that you've certainly given us some food for thought. And so I think we, you know, hopefully then towards the end of the session where we have the roundtable discussion, you will have a chance to sort of reflect on and do more justice to what's a fine piece of work. I should also apologise as well. I didn't give Liz a brief introduction. Just very brief, as was said, that she's an independent researcher and consultant for higher education, and she's Professor of Education at Edge Hill University. I think that's Ormskirk. I think so. I think it's just north of Liverpool. She's visiting Professor of Academic Development at Staffordshire University. She's over 15 years' experience of undertaking and managing research about widening participation, student retention and success, and institutional approaches to improving the student experience. So you can see here that in her presentation she certainly knows what she's talking about. And just going back there, the project there, she's director of the What Works Student Retention and Success Change Programme on behalf of the Higher Education Academy in the UK, working with Action on Access, which is funded by the Paul Hamlin Foundation. And so I just wanted to say that it was a really, really fine piece of work. You certainly you kicked off very, very well. I just briefly I sort of reminded there like about the whole phrase about college knowledge, that if you don't know the codes when you're talking about your daughter, if you don't know the codes about college, it can be very, very hard to fit in. What's, you know, if you don't know the numbers, you know, if you don't know how to add, it doesn't make sense, and you can be frustrated. You were frustrated, you know, with your daughter because your reference points were different, and the same way if you come into college. So you've given some really, really good stuff, and I thought you finished up really well and linked really in well with our next presenter here, which is you basically asked, you know, sort of asked this question. We have all this data, but what do we do with all this data? So I suppose our next presenter, our next keynote speaker is Sean O'Reilly, who acts as the project manager for the Irish Survey of Student Engagement. And he reports to the project co-sponsors, namely the Higher Education Authority, the HEA, the IOTI, the Institute of Technology, or the Irish Institute of Technology Institutes, which is the umbrella for all of the IOTs in Ireland, and the Irish Universities Association, and the Union of Students of Ireland, and is based in the IOTI in Dublin. He joined the project in December 2012 during the pre-testing phase, having previously worked as an independent consultant following 4 years with the National Qualifications Authority of Ireland. So I suppose what he's going to do is, once again, he's going to give us that whistle-stop tour of what do we do, but also I think provide some very, very informative and insightful suggestions about what about what people can actually, about what staff, what departments, and indeed what colleges can do with the data. So if you're there, Sean, once again, we're moving from Yorkshire, we've now moved to Dublin. So we will just check if we actually have you, and I can see you there, Sean. So I'm just going to knock off my video and wish you all the best.
Fair enough. Thanks for that, Tom, and good morning, everybody. Yeah, I've got a little bit of a challenge indeed then to, one, fulfill Tom's brief, but two, actually follow that very valuable contribution from Liz. But I'll do what I can, and as Tom mentioned earlier on, then please take opportunities to note any questions or work with the chat function from there. What I'm going to try to do over approximately 20 minutes or so is give you a very quick overview of where the national project is at this stage, and then begin to draw on some, but I stress some, of the very many possible interesting messages contained within the data that we've generated so far. So in effect, we're really looking and saying, what can the national project actually do at this point for institutions? So I suppose the first thing would be, what is it? Liz made the point that for staff involved in transitions initiatives, it can be quite difficult to generate a wider awareness across the institution. And I think it would be fair to say for the Irish Survey of Student Engagement, that's still the case to some extent. After 2014, we have actually had our first full implementation, so the first non-pilot implementation. Tom actually touched on the fact that I have many bosses. I report to many organizations, each of the project co-sponsors. But from my perspective, it's very important as well. This is a national partnership. This is not a project which has been imposed on institutions. This is genuinely designed as a national partnership. So from my point of view, if I think about the partners, I think about the 30 institutions involved so far, and that includes all of the universities, all the institutes of technology, all the colleges of education, and a number of other colleges, and then the national agencies or other bodies that would have an interest as well. At this stage, in 2014, we've had almost 20,000 students respond to the national survey. And in many ways, it is the national context that potentially adds some of the real value for this project, because an individual institution can look at its own data relating to its own students, but also has the national context. And because of the origins of the project, there is also an ability to look at some of the comparative data that would be available in other countries that have operated with similar surveys. So the Irish survey is based on what we regarded, or what project working groups with representatives of institutions regarded as best practice internationally. So really this comes down to the National Survey of Student Engagement in the US has been in operation since 2000. The Australasian Survey of Student Engagement has been in operation in Australia and New Zealand since 2007. And the Irish survey is based very much on those questions. So to that extent, in terms of similar surveys taking place internationally, we are talking about the first system-wide survey of its kind in Europe. But NESI, surveys that originated with the US survey, there are an increasing number of those in operation worldwide. It is an engagement survey. So it is very deliberately designed to explore student engagement. It is not what you might term as a consumerist survey. It's concerned with the overall student experience. So engagement in the context of the National Survey Project is defined as students' involvement in activities and environments that are likely to generate high-quality learning. Students are responsible, but institutions and staff can create an environment that encourages and promotes student involvement in educationally relevant activities. And that's quite an important point which we'll come to when we look at some of the questions later on. This survey is looking at the overall student experience, so it's more than simply the formal taught provision. It goes beyond that. It is a student survey. So let's try to clear some of the myths that have begun to build up about the complexity of the actual instrument here. It is a survey. We ask students questions online and they respond to those questions. But there are a lot of questions. And because there are so many questions, there are also indices relating to student engagement or student outcomes. Now, the indices at the early stages of the pilot certainly contributed to a lack of transparency and a lack of clarity amongst staff about what exactly are these indices doing. So in effect, and I will touch on this later on, groups of questions that relate to a particular aspect of student engagement or student outcomes, the results from those can be grouped together to create a score for an index. And the indices then produce what you might regard as a series of signposts. The numbers themselves are simply indicators of, does this number look higher or lower than we might expect for similar groups of students? And this is an attempt to try to facilitate navigation of the data set. It's a large data set. And my message today and next week and for the last year and probably for the next number of years is to say it is a large data set. It's intended to be comprehensive. But every single member of staff within an institution and every interested party should feel confident enough to begin to explore those parts of the data that would be of relevance to them. So if we actually look at 2014 data, we had, as I said earlier, almost 20,000 students. That's 15.6% of the target group. Now the target group for this survey is first year undergraduate, final year undergraduate, and postgraduate students on taught programs. And there's very deliberately those groups because that provides the international comparability. Now, this may be discussed in sort of future iterations of the survey as we fine-tune it and refine it to better meet the needs of the partners in Ireland. But that's what the survey is at this point. But let's actually go straight to our topic for today. If we're actually talking about transitions, let's actually think about first years then. Not the only group that will be transitioning, but certainly one of the more obvious ones to start with. Over 9,500 first years responded to the survey. So after the first non-pilot iteration of the survey, we already have a very significant set of data at a national level to begin to investigate what these first-year students are actually telling us. And of course, percentages and numbers can distort perceptions of how representative this data would be. I would have to say, from the pilot and from the 2014 implementation so far, evidence indicates that the data we're collecting is representative of the national student population. But if we're looking at first years then, we're actually saying, okay, for first years only, 9,136 of them were full-time, 378 were part-time or remote, 8,835 were Irish, 7% were non-Irish. And again, I put that figure in there specifically to say you might look at a headline of the data, or you might have it presented by somebody in your institution and go, oh, 7%, we may not be able to investigate that in a valuable way. But actually, at a national level, that's 679 non-Irish first years. So take a moment when, if you look at the data in the future, to distinguish between overall percentage response rate and the actual number of respondents. The data is also presented by broad field of study. Now, this is deliberately done in any national reporting from the project. National reporting from the project is very careful to meet the needs of all the partners, and therefore institution-level results are not published in the national reports. In a similar way, field of study in the national reports is presented by ISCED 1 digit. So this would give you a broad sense of field of study, and this is designed to lend some information, some value to what we're doing, but actually to avoid the risk of sort of pointing the finger at very small disciplines within institutions. So immediately as we look here, we have significant numbers of first-year students who have responded from following particular disciplines. And equally, in some disciplines, we have lower numbers of students. Now, when you start to look at institution-level results, this interpretation, this understanding of what your statistical data might mean requires the local context. You may have a low number of students who responded to the survey from a particular discipline or from a particular year group, perhaps postgraduate taught, tends to be low, the participation tends to be lower so far for a number of institutions. But you locally would know whether that number of students actually is still valuable to look at what they've actually told you. We also have, amongst the many questions in the survey, 2 free text questions. And even without looking at the numbers, I would encourage you to look at free text responses. The 2 particular questions are, there's a question about what does your institution do, what are the best aspects of what your institution does to engage students? And there's a question, what could your institution do better to improve how it engages students? And there are simple free text responses there. Now, even if in a particular area you have relatively low numbers of respondents, and I stress the word relatively, but if you have relatively low numbers of respondents to the survey, you have free text responses. You have actual typed answers that your students, your first years, your part-time first years, your first years from a particular field of study, the responses they have given to these questions. And these are responses that have been provided confidentially to the survey company. So students have a guarantee of confidentiality. Data that returns to the institution has student IDs and other identifiers removed or scrambled. Equally, in the free text responses, the free text has been cleaned by a third-party company before it's returned to the institution. So, for example, any names that may have been included in free text responses have been removed before the institution comes back, before the data comes back to the institution. And now we get to potentially some of the harder bit, perhaps. Institutions have received a series of data files back from the survey. These data files, for some of the intended audience, or some of the interested parties within an institution, may be quite off-putting. But we have percentage responses to individual questions, and then we also have index scores. So I will stress what I've mentioned earlier on, but I stress it because it has been a source of some uncertainty or lack of confidence by people beginning to think about the survey and the potential value of the data, but who've not been directly involved so far. Index scores are calculated from the responses to individual questions that contribute to that index. So because of that, they are not percentages. And this can be explained in considerably more detail than I have, or time than I have this morning. But they are signposts. So in the data file, institutions have index scores and percentage responses to individual questions for their students. If I look at this in a little more detail, if I want to look at active learning, if I'm thinking about transitions, if I'm thinking about teaching and learning, if I'm thinking about how can academic staff perhaps make greatest impact or greatest difference to the students they experience on a regular basis, active learning would often feature fairly high up the priority list as a possible area of interest. So if I look at active learning, then first of all, I can only consider the scores for that index. There is no value in comparing the score for active learning against the score for enriching education experiences. So if I'm looking at active learning, I say first years in this sample institution, and every institution that participated has an equivalent file for themselves. In the sample institution, first year's active learning score is 38.1. What does that mean in many ways, it means very little by itself. What it does mean, when you start to look at relative indicators, treat it as a signpost. First years are reporting active learning scores that are lower than final year students. First years in this sample institution are reporting active learning scores that are slightly higher than the national picture. So rather than worrying what exactly does 38.1 mean, there's a very quick instinctive reaction. Okay, for our first years, broadly, it's a little bit better than national. So that may not be a major priority area of action unless it already matches an existing discussion within the institution. If I look at supportive learning environment, these scores, so the score for my sample institution here is 57.3. Again, I say that score is much higher than the score for active learning, but that means nothing valuable. I'm only looking at the fact first years are reporting supportive active learning at 57.1. Postgraduate taught students are reporting supportive learning of 49.3. Really, all I can say at this point is, in this sample institution, first years are reporting a more supportive learning environment than taught postgraduate students. Now, in many ways, this highlights a key point. The data, the survey, produces a source of information. It does not produce judgments. There is no reason, perhaps, to worry about supportive learning environment scores for postgraduate taught students. In your institution, you might say, I would expect first years to feel they have a more supportive learning environment than taught postgraduate students. And if that was an area of interest, either for further exploration or possibly to leave for now, then go look at the questions that contribute to that index. When we go look at particular questions, here are just a number of examples. So these are first year only from the national data set. 83% of first years reported positive experience with positive relationships with other students. 67% of them reported positive relationships with teaching staff. 49% reported positive relationships with administrative staff. Is this an issue? Only you can say within your institution. Administrative staff would, of course, involve administrative staff within faculties, within colleges, within schools, not simply the admin block within the institution. Equally, you might say that first years you would expect to have limited engagement with administrative staff, but it might prompt something, a discussion locally. 75% of first years nationally reported they spend quite a bit or very much spending significant time studying or in academic work. But 28% of first years said they spend no time participating in extracurricular activities. So the question might be, how engaged are these students? Or have they simply got competing priorities and demands on their time? Worryingly, and I am moving from data source to an instinctive sense of judgment here, 66% of first years nationally reported they never or only sometimes received timely written or oral feedback on their academic performance. Now, here are a set of questions. There are over 100 questions. The sheer number of these is one of the influences that led to the development of the indices as a way of beginning to navigate to areas you might actually wish to explore in more detail. This is a comprehensive data set. There is a lot of information here, and really every member of staff, and indeed the Students' Union and other interested parties that you would be willing to share the data with, every interested party could begin to step into those parts of the data that are of relevance to them. I've already mentioned the student guarantee of confidentiality. and I mentioned the fact that 3 specific files are returned to each institution. I've given you a sense so far of the comprehensive nature. Hopefully you're not thinking complicated and very off-putting, but the comprehensive nature of these files. And at this point, we're going to link to a video which steps through each of the files fairly quickly. The video is about 4 minutes long. It obviously will be available after this webinar as well in terms of revisiting, but it gives a sense of what other potential there is within the data. And don't forget, as mentioned earlier on, you can of course choose to maximize this yourself. As I say, it's about 4 minutes long, and then I'll come back very briefly after it. Okay, so we're back. I know in terms of time this morning, we're beginning to get under a little bit of pressure. That video and a longer video will actually continue to be available in addition to the materials from the National Forum and from this webinar. And we plan to actually add to those over time. In effect, I would say the Irish Survey of Student Engagement offers the potential to be a valuable tool to begin to meet some of the challenges and opportunities outlined by Liz earlier on. The free text responses are particularly valuable. The indices, really treat them as signposts, and if you think you've got a score that's of particular interest, check the number of responses. At this point, we are still at a stage where some groups within the student population are getting involved with the survey less than others. Also check what were students asked. Is there a local context? And plan for further action. And further action doesn't require necessarily a survey. Talk to your students. They can give you an insight into what they actually meant. In terms of planning for further action, there is obviously the report nationally of results, but equally we published a second report in January of what institutions are beginning to do in terms of delivering effective feedback and beginning to explore how they might use ISI data. There you go. There's your very whistle-stop tour this morning.
Sean, really, really good material. You've certainly given us some very, very insightful material there. I think the use of the indices is very useful. You're not trying to have an absolute, comparison, but I do think, when you're trying to sort of understand something as in some ways as nebulous as student engagement, we need some sort of measure, if you will, or some sort of indicator. And I suppose it just ties back into what Liz had said there earlier about, we can't maybe establish always cause and effect, but we do need to see, have some measurable outcomes, and to give us some sort of benchmark, if you will. And I think the videos are very, very useful, very self-explanatory. You certainly gave some food for thought there. As a lecturer myself, I'm kind of wondering about, it sort of confirms what I suspect sometimes, that some people are not always giving what they could do, and they're not getting as engaged as maybe they should for their own sake. But also I think both for ourselves as educators, as colleges, we need to also look at some very, very useful data. As I said there in the comment there, I think in the free text we might learn some very, very interesting, and I sort of say that with a smile when I say it's interesting, but hopefully people will give us some real food for thought. And I think certainly at a departmental level, it would be very, very useful. I can certainly imagine at a departmental meeting for someone in each department to sort of go through and maybe just give some pointers and thoughts there. And as I said, certainly Liz talked there about the need to sort of have qualitative and quantitative, and I think for such a large scale survey you've also managed to capture, I think, some of that qualitative. And as I said, you also shown that large-scale quantitative, when it's done well and there's lots of questions there, you can also produce some very fine-grained material there. So I think we'll be certainly coming back to you on that, and you're right, we're 16 minutes behind time, but that's no problem, because we've actually allowed a little bit towards the end for discussions and stuff like that. So we're going to move, still staying in Leinster now, we're going to move down, I think it's the M9, and that's a good point there, sorry Sean, yeah, every institution has a contact, and as I said, that people should link in with that. So we're now going to move down, I think it's the M9, to Carlow Institute of Technology, and then we're going to actually start moving around our partner institutions in the Southern Cluster. And we're now going to move with the Dermot O'Shea and Anne Carpenter down in Carlow IT. Dermot and his colleague Padraig Loughlin have been managing and providing tuition in the IT Carlow Computing Academic Support Centre for the past 12 years. Padraig himself provides guidance and support mainly with computer programming, and Dermot himself focuses on mathematics support. And Dermot has been a maths lecturer in IT Carlow for over 25 years. So I suppose the thing what we're going to try and do now is moving away, say, maybe from macro issues there, and now we're going to start looking at sort of the more micro issues. We're actually going to look at a number of initiatives. So if we're already there, I'm just going to knock off my video and my talk button and hand over to you in Carlow.
Good morning, Tom. This is Anne Carpenter here in IT Carlow with my colleague Dermot O'Shea, and we're going to talk about some of the tried and tested transition initiatives here in Carlow. I hope you can all hear me there. Nice to see Liz again. I remember being involved with Liz in a very nice study trip to Bergen many years ago. So first of all, I just want to set the context, I suppose, of our work here in Carlow in relation to this whole area, I suppose, of transition, retention, and the notion of student success. And it goes back, I suppose, to a study we conducted in 2000 along with IT Tralee and our partners in Dundalk IT, in which we conducted a survey of our first-year students, those who passed and those who failed. We did a comparative study. And I suppose out of that study, one of the key issues that emerged, among many others, in terms of highlighting the complexity of this issue around retention, was the students said that they did not receive the academic support that they needed in relation to the particular programs. And I suppose in some ways that warranted a shift maybe in our thinking around the notion of a move from retention to the notion of focusing on student success. And to quote Tinto again, it's this particular attention to first year and their participation and engagement in the classrooms, as well as the engagement within the institute. And this morning we are focusing on this whole area of academic success here in Carlow. And to just have this chart to highlight, I suppose, in some ways, the different here we would start off, and I suppose if we look back in the year 2000, our whole emphasis in relation to transition initiatives was the whole area around induction, and particularly the focus of the collaborative and the integration of student services and student support service induction with academic induction. And then this linked into the notion of a tutor system and systematic monitoring of students related to their academic performance, and this was particularly linked to what we've developed over the years of early formative assessment within the first 6 weeks of the students' first years, that they have the formative assessment and feedback, and out of that then the identification of the students at risk, and the students at risk in particular subject areas. And now our focus is moving much more to that whole notion of the first year curriculum and I suppose the notion of the transitions pedagogy. So one initiative I just want to talk about here this morning is the initiative of supplementary teaching, which is an initiative linked to the teaching in the classroom, the tutor system, and this early identification of the students at risk. It complements class teaching and it's not regarded as a substitute for it. And I suppose it's predicated on the whole notion that the learners are participating, attending class, and that there is a monitoring of the performance. and it's focused on the notion of peer and group learning in timetable sessions. So this scheme has been running in Carlow over a number of years, and you can see, I just have the figures here for 2013-14, that the highest use of this particular scheme is in the business area. 49% of the hours are allocated, 23 in engineering, 12 to our Wexford campus, and 16 in science. In 2013-14, over 910 hours were allocated to this particular scheme, and we had over 1,000 students participating. In terms of linking this particular scheme in and engaging students in the process, we have tried to set up a format whereby the students will initially, it's the identification of the students at risk through the early assessment. Then it is a meeting with a tutor, lecturer to agree to participate. It's approved, organised by the department, and then it's monitored and followed up by the programme board. The next step then we have in relation to this is obviously in terms of evaluation, is the linking and trying to identify how this improves student success in terms of exam participation. Anecdotally, we have feedback from students individually and from lecturers and tutors that it makes a huge difference to the students who participate, but we haven't quantitatively evaluated yet. And just another scheme that we have in place is this, where we follow up with our students who are not attending or who have not performed well in their by Christmas and exams, in terms of a letter that is sent out to them. This is an example of the postcard we've used in the past and some are using currently, where they are invited in for an interview, a conversation with the head department or tutor in terms of trying to identify what are the particular issues involved. So at this stage, I'm going to hand you over to my colleague, Stuart O'Shea, who's going to talk about the particular initiatives in the computing department.
Good morning, everybody. I hope you can all hear me. My name is Dermot O'Shea, and this is my first time presenting on a webinar, so here goes. I also must say I'm going to have to go through this fairly quickly because I have a tutorial myself at 11 o'clock and I'm on for the rest of the day, so I won't be around later on. And I just realised I didn't leave my email address on the slide, so I will put my email address on the chat facility in a few moments when I'm finished. Anyway, I'm here to talk about an initiative that has as its main focus the retention of first-year computing students through supporting them academically, particularly in particular subject areas. So in that way it relates to transition into higher education and supporting students academically and leading into creating social networks of working groups for with the students. I'm going to break this into three parts: the context, the methodology we use, the operating methodology, and then finally measuring effectiveness, so the whole issue of measuring effectiveness. Our academic support is dedicated solely to the computing students, so we have relatively small numbers, small target audience, and that has, in the last 12 years, fluctuated between 75 and 170 now. We're at a peak. The demand has gone up for studying this area. It's funded externally from the HEA, Higher Education Authority, under the Information Technology Investment Fund. This funding has provided resources as two half lectures, as I call, that's myself and Padraig. Half our lecturing load is taken up with this demand. We've also been given 2 tutorial rooms, whiteboards and usual equipment to help us. How do we operate this support? Well, our original brief back 12 years ago was to have a drop-in centre and be available for students from 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, for them to drop in. We quickly realised that that was not fit for purpose here because our students have large contact hours and we'd be sitting there for chunks of time which all our students were meant to be in class. So we evolved it into more suiting the students' pattern of demand. Our support is mainly in maths and programming, although we are available to support in other subjects. So they're identified as the main problem areas for helping that students have in progressing to second year. I would describe our support as our demand for our support as coming in 2 major waves. initially, early in the year, at the very beginning, we'll play a central role in induction. We email all the students. We create as high a profile of ourselves as we possibly can. And this gets a response from the students who are concerned and anxious and looking for every kind of support they can get, which is generally mature students. We get huge demand from mature students early on. We also work very closely with the lecturers in terms of monitoring student attendance, performance and assessment, and we get some feedback on that come October, November. And then we go after, so to speak, students who we identify have been at risk already or might be at risk, demanding that to them as forcefully as we can that they come and get support to ensure they have the best chance possible of progressing to second year. To look at this more closely, we suggest to the students to contact us by email anytime they want to if they want to get support, and we arrange appointments. We know their timetables, either groups or one-to-one, whatever the students want and within the limits of the constraints of our time. We also are available in a flexible way to answer students' questions online, by which I really usually mean email, and we can troubleshoot programs. If they can send us a program that isn't computer program that isn't working, and we can go and try and help them work through why it mightn't be working, troubleshoot it for them. Same with maths problems. The proactive side is when we have got some feedback from the lecturers on students' performance and attendance, and we send them fairly blunt emails along the lines of your performance so far, if it continues in this way, you will not get through the second year, and if it is your intention or your desire to get through the second year, we think you should come and talk to us, and would also have organised tutorials at particular times, which is, by the way, what I'm going to between 11 and 1 this morning. We would direct them to attend these tutorials, encourage, demand, whatever way you want to put it. One of the conditions of the tutorials is continuing attendance at these tutorials is that the students are given tasks to do in between, which they hand up, and this actually takes up 50% of my time particularly, is where students hand me up work, small bits of work that I read through, give written feedback on, and then bring to the next tutorial and go through it with them. So that's kind of an overview of our methodology. And now, finally, looking at what has been pointed out as a challenging issue, that's measuring effectiveness and efficiency, which I suppose most people immediately kind of wonder, how effective is all this? Well, first of all, I put in a major caveat here. I think it's very problematic when you're comparing with small numbers. I mean, I do think we're dealing with quite small numbers. Some of our programs have 30, 40 students. There's a lot of instability. The curriculum has changed over the last 12 years. Our first year, a lot of our first years now have no end-of-year exam. It's all continual assessment, and it's very practical-based. We've only 7 lectures and about 20 hours in labs, which is a big change than 10 years ago. The diversity composition has been changing over the years. We've more mature students than we used to have. Entry points have changed quite a lot in the last 5 years. Different lectures can make a big difference, and then there's simple random factors that are often overlooked particularly by people lacking in statistical literacy. I mean, a group of 30 students one year can be fantastic, and the next year not, harder to work with, and no reason can be given. Anyway, nonetheless, despite that, here goes on my attempts to measure effectiveness and efficiency. The first thing people look at, of course, is progression rates. They're the overall progression rates as I have myself calculated them. I know there's various ways of doing it, but I look at the names of the students who were in second year on the 1st of October, who had been in first year the previous year, and that's the ratio to those who were in first year the previous year. But anyway, they're the progression rates. Not much you can say about them. They're in line with national figures. I have compared them to national figures in the ICT area, ranging from 65 to 75%. Another measure we have here is the proportion of students who visited the centre, used the support, and no real pattern there. Between 45 and 55% of our first year students over the last few years. By the way, I didn't point out our statistics. I have them since 2003, but I only have them up here for back there. It's far enough back to get an idea, but no real pattern. And I'd also like to point out at this stage that I believe it's inconceivable that a first year would be unaware of the support of who we are, because I also provide programming tutorials to them all and talk to them, so they're all aware of the support. Another statistic we can throw up here is the number of hours tuition myself and Padraig provide combined over the years. It has grown in the last few years per week, the average number of hours per week. This does not include reading through the work and providing feedback, administrative work, taking records and doing that, but that's giving you an idea of the growth in the last while. Progression rates. Now, I've also gone to the bother of, over the years, broken the progression rates down into from two aspects. One of those who never come and visit the centre, that's table 4A. In red, you'll see the figures that correspond to table 1, which is the overall progression rates. But here, if we look at table 4A, actually I might use a pointer now for the first time. I should have been using it. No. Right, I won't bother. Well, okay, just looking at those figures there, we can see. Okay, first of all, for 4A, I should say, ideally they'd be 100%. I mean, that would mean that any student who didn't come and visit us got through, and that would be the ideal. Second one, all right. Okay, here we are. Ideally, that would be 100%, but obviously, as we can see, it's not. I don't really see any strong comparative pattern there, you know, to draw any major conclusions. Maybe someone in the audience can. All I could say is they're not 100%, and if we move to the next, the table 4B is the progression rates of users. People have come and used our support, and again, I don't really see any major pattern. And you know, comparing these is a difficult process, fraught with difficulty, because you have, first of all, students correctly self-assess that they do not need support. This is why the top part of the table is, if this was ideal, the top table 4A would have been 100%, all 100%. Students incorrectly self-assess that they do not need support. That's why they're not all 100%. Students do not use the support due to lack of engagement and motivation. That's another reason why the top table 4A was not all 100%. And also you have the other factors, students who are very motivated, avail of every support to help them improve. And we proactively urge at-risk students to attend. Well, this brings me on towards the end now to what I think is I feel anyway, the most useful way of measuring our effectiveness is where every year in early October, I survey our second years, paper-based anonymous survey, 100%, we'll talk about the early response rates of 15, 20% or whatever it is. This is a 100% response rate because I teach them and I make sure I get them all. And I asked them, amongst other things, to circle one of the following 4 options. 1, I would not have progressed to second year without the extra support. 2, the extra support helped my performance, but I would have progressed without it. Now, you know, this would mean that we've helped them to sustain their academic progress. 3, the extra support made no difference to my performance. We didn't get many of those, thankfully. I progressed to second year without any help from the centre. This would be the biggest cohort, actually. You know, people who correctly assessed that they didn't need support, and other. So the results were, I find, encouraging anyway. You can see there in green. These are broken, tables 5A and 5B, into, we have our programs we game students that have different entry requirements than the rest, so I just don't separate them because the game students generally don't engage with the support as much as the non-game students. But you can see the numbers there for table 5A go between 15 and 35%. So, you know, between 15 and 35% of students in second year they themselves feel that they would not be there only for the support we got. Again, if you look at the game students, that's slightly lower, between 10 and 30%. You can see a significant proportions of students circled 2 as well, meaning that we helped them. They felt they would have got through anyway, but we've helped them in their experience. And of course, the largest numbers, as I promised, would be those who circled 4, who said they never came for help and they're fine and they got through the second year, and that's great, fair play to them. So, like what I often usually kind of summarize this by saying, you know, I think 1 in 4 of our second years, they feel themselves that without us, they would not be there, and I think that's an endorsement of our service. Finally, another issue that I bring up for anybody who's really concerned about efficiency is this idea of collateral retention that I came across myself in a survey I did in 2005, 2006, and I think I've never seen much discussion about it, although I'm not really out there, I'm so busy with other things. Half our students didn't progress the games year, so I took it upon myself that summer to do a telephone survey with them all, bringing far places as Canada and Japan and tracking them all down. And I was actually surprised that 80% of them were continuing higher education, and that was 16 out of 20, and 11 of those were actually coming back to Carlow to do courses in design, business, and other computing courses, and they attributed the support that we got and the supporting environment as a major factor in their decision to continue doing education, even though they will be down as having not succeeded in our courses. So I call that collateral retention, something that I don't know myself whether that's looked at a lot. Okay, thank you very much, and I'm sorry I'm going to have to rush off now.
Thanks very much, Dermot. And I realise, yeah, you're literally on in 4 minutes there. Just but some very, very interesting stuff there. And my own personal thing, as I said, is that even at 15 or 35%, I mean, you can, in terms of the problems that it can cause at college, and also on the individuals and on their family's life, you know, that if they don't progress, I think anything which certainly makes any impact certainly has to be useful. Just Jim, before you go though, do you have any indication in terms of the breakdowns of international students, Leaving Cert applicants, and mature students, of those three groups? You know, who's your biggest user and who's your smallest user? You'll have to press your talk button, Dermot.
Sorry, what you said, Leaving Cert, international students? Students and matures. Just roughly, what's the breakdown of the... we don't have very many international students in computing. So it would be, I think I described it there, would roughly end up being 50-50 in terms of mature and Leaving Cert. The mature students definitely we see a lot of before Christmas, because they come in very anxious, and all of them practically feeling, oh, look at all these young people here, they've just done the Leaving Cert and I don't know, it's so long since I've done it. But you know, by and large, most of them realise after a while that they are in a good place, and we work on giving them the confidence and letting them know, listen, you know, you're fine, you don't worry about it, we're here to help you. And that, you know, when they get, you know, really that only works to an extent, but when they do their first assessments, and they see they're doing fine, very quickly then they realize that, you know, they begin to feel comfortable about it. So then, excuse me, the Leaving Cert students, when they come initially, I suppose they're so overwhelmed with everything, and you know, they're starting off college and the whole social thing to deal with that mature students don't have as much. They take time to come to us for support, and very often they have to be prodded or urged as a result of poor performance and assessment, and which kind of materializes in late October, early November. So I would think overall about 50-50 between them. I don't. International students is not really an issue with us. There's only one or two now and again. That's it. Oh. Okay. Hopefully that answers your question.
Cheers, thanks. I'm very mindful you're trying to rush off, and maybe Anne or yourself or someone else might want to come in on this. And Jessica asked a question: is it problematic to ask students to measure their own performance and to try and assess how they might have performed without this support?
I don't know what you mean by problematic, but I guess what I was trying to get the message getting across there, it's very difficult to measure the effectiveness and efficiency of initiatives like this for the very reason that the environment keeps changing, quite dramatically, I would argue. So the best thing I could think of, and the only thing I could think of actually, was to ask the second years themselves who got through. I mean, I've also done other things like tried to contact the people who didn't come for support and didn't get through, to find out why they didn't come for support. You know, doing that by phone interviews over the summer. It's very hard to track people down, and I would have tried quite hard. Usually the reason they give is that they didn't bother and they should have. Once or twice you get someone saying they never heard of the support, but I honestly, to be honest, I don't believe that. I don't see how it could be possible that they wouldn't have heard of it, because they're a small kind of community, and I would see them all in their labs. So problematic asking them what they think themselves, yeah, maybe, but that's the best I can come up with. I suppose the only way I can answer that.
Yeah, no, and well, my own personal thing, I suppose, as I said, it's we are talking here about effectiveness and efficiency, and as you quite rightly say, it's very difficult to sort of get some sort of feedback. So I think asking people how they feel themselves, the impact it made. I think it's a fair question. But if anybody else here who's taking part this morning, if they want to type in their own sort of thoughts or suggestions, I think, as I said, you've certainly made a very good effort. As I said, ringing Canada and everything like that has not been easy here like that. So
sorry, Tony, if I could just say there that I didn't in the last communication. The numbers are so small. They're trying to compare statistics with groups of 30, 40, even 50 students year on year. I think it's not statistically sound very often to compare progression rates based on those small numbers. Yeah, I think it's a fair point. Yeah, as I said, on progression rates, I think that in some ways they're quite crude, whereas I said, at least my own personal feeling is that by asking someone the impact that it made, I think is a legitimate thing. I mean, people don't have to answer if they don't wish. So I agree myself. So listen, look, I'm really mindful that you're gone away for the rest of the day. Thanks very much for sharing this. As I said, it's a very, very good program, and I think, as I said, what we're talking about today's webinar is just throwing out ideas about how we might sort of investigate effectiveness and efficiency. And I think certainly Dermot and his collaborator there, Padraig, has certainly given a good indication of the sort of difficulties that are faced, and I think a very worthwhile sort of initiative. Someone is looking to come in. So Anne, you're looking to come in here.
Yeah, Tom, I suppose it's just highlighting the complexity of this issue, and therefore when we're assessing effectiveness and how to measure that is very difficult, because there's so many different factors involved here. In terms of our supplementary teaching scheme, we have feedback from students that it has helped them, but there are so many other factors involved in this and student success that I think it's quite difficult to take one particular indice and look at that.
Absolutely, and I think, as I said, it's one of the good things about the webinar. We're trying to sort of just throw out some ideas there, and I think sort of certainly what Dermot and Padraig have done is very good. And I think personally, I thought the figures, while he was sort of talking about 15 to 35%, but I personally would think that if somebody is if we save even 5 or 10% of people and they sort of move on and we retain them and they progress, I think that those sort of initiatives are well worthwhile. Yeah. Absolutely. So I'm just going to now pass, and we're going to move along the way now. We're running a bit behind time, but that's okay as well. To Noreen Deedy, and she is in University College Cork. She's the first year experience coordinator in UCC. She's responsible for the transition of all first year and new students into UCC. And in terms of this particular webinar, she conducts exit interviews with students and collates both qualitative and quantitative data on student withdrawals. Now, she's the only holder of this post in Ireland, and she's a registered guidance counsellor and is currently vice chair of the Confederation of Student Services in Ireland. So, as I said, we're going to move down and along the way into Cork. So, Noreen, if you are there, we might get you in. I can see that you're listed. You might just want to click on your video and your talk buttons. I can see you there, Noreen. And if you just want to come on board.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can hear you fine, Noreen.
Okay,
I'm now going to switch off the video and talk button. Welcome aboard.
Great. Thank you very much. First of all, I just want to say thanks to IT Tralee, to Noel, to Tom, to Tony for this opportunity to tell you what works in UCC in terms of our transition initiatives. So thanks for that. Let's see if I could move this on. Oops. I'm trying to get to the next page. Okay, there we go. Okay, so I suppose when we talk about evidence, we must often step back from our own beliefs and our opinions and rely on facts with evidence to support claims about what works. Our decisions must be informed and they must be smart. And more than ever, I suppose decisions have to be based on systematic evidence of systematic appraisal of the best evidence that is available in the context of our prevailing values, and of course our available resources. And I suppose Liz mentioned action research earlier on, and I carried out some action research in order to find out, find practical solutions to support students in their transition. And the first question, and I suppose one thing to say about action research is that it focuses on the pursuit of practical solutions, trying them out, evaluating them, did it work, and then changing practice in light of that evaluation. So action research is very valuable from that perspective. I suppose lots of teachers in classrooms would carry out action research, communities as well. So I'm having slide problems in moving on my slides. Oh. Okay, so there we are. So first of all, identifying the problem, and I suppose we know these already, but I think it's no harm to say them again, that transition is not identical for every student. So in UCC we have over 3,500 first-year students, and that's 3,500 transitions, honestly. And I suppose student numbers and diversity are increasing. So higher education institutions are challenged in optimizing the chances of a successful transition for all our students. 80% of our student population are in an intense and highly developmental phase of their lives. And sometimes we forget about this. We often hear, staff saying, oh, they're adults now, they should be independent. But actually, they are not. They are what Arlett referred to in 2004 as emerging adults. It's the age of, I suppose, identity exploration, of the age of instability, where life is, where they're more self-focused than they were ever before. They have high hopes, big dreams, and they're in that feeling. They're feeling in between, I suppose, that in that liminal space. So we must be very, very conscious of that. And I suppose that we must respond to the developmental needs of students, and we must be familiar with the theories, I think, of human development, and Erickson is a good reference there. The Department of Education and Skills on Transition in 2013, ran some focus groups with Leaving Cert students, and they were very negative about the Leaving Certificate, and they reported that it didn't help in making the transition to third level. And so I suppose the points race has a negative effect on teaching and learning, and there is evidence to suggest also that many Leaving Cert students suffer anxiety and stress during the Leaving Certificate, because there is that expectation that they should be progressing to higher education, and maybe not all students want to progress to higher education, and not all the students in our campuses are able to stay in higher education. So that generates its own stress and anxiety among students, and we must be aware of that too. And of course, the timing allows very little flexibility for students or for higher education providers to ensure that the final choices made by students are based on the most complete information possible. So the students' potential, their motivation, they're not taken into account in admission to our universities. So many students, as a result, choose the wrong program when they are completing their CAO, and they're offered a place and they just take up that place. So that has a knock-on effect, I suppose, in retention in our universities. So these are just some of the challenges faced by our students. And these we should, just keep to the forefront of our mind. I'm having problems again in moving this on. Okay, so here we are. So once we identified the problem, what the problem was, we devised a plan. And the plan emerged from a review of the literature. I certainly read a lot about Liz Thomas's What Works project. Nancy Schlossberg writes a lot about transitional theory. Tinto also about social and academic transitions. I analyzed the data in this institution. I knew what I was looking for, so I was able to mine that data accurately. I organized student and staff focus groups, and just over 100 staff and students participated in focus groups. And of course, I've been collecting both qualitative and quantitative data from exit interviews since 2007. And every year, I survey first-year students 3 to 4 weeks after they join us on campus. And it's not at all like the ISI survey. Students are asked very few questions. They're open-ended questions. For example, I would ask the students like, what were the main challenges they faced before they actually arrived onto campus, when they got the offer when they got their CAO offer? What were the main challenges they faced in the first week? What were the main challenges they faced in the third week? And ask them, were they still struggling? Were they still challenged by transition? And where were they struggling? And tell us how we can make it better. So the surveys, for us, they generated a lot of information from the students. So I asked the question, I searched for the evidence, and I evaluated the evidence, and then I implemented a plan. And that plan was the Fáilte Fest. And many of you are familiar with Fáilte Fest, but every year we add to this program. And the Fáilte Fest engages students before they arrive on campus, actively engages them 3 weeks before they arrive on campus. So for example, the Open Door Welcome for Family and Friends attracted over 700 visitors last year to campus. It was a Saturday, so families could tour campus. They met with staff, both academic and student support services staff. I introduced myself to them, guaranteed them that their students were in safe hands in UCC. So it was a very important day for families. They visited the facilities, the library, accommodation complexes, etc. Also, our HERE students, 6% of our students enter through the higher education access route, and they attend a residential program. And the focus here, I suppose, on everything is developing friendships and social networks, I suppose. And I think it's Patricia Broadfoot, not to be confused with Nancy Barefoot, because I'm always confusing both those, speaks about the human side of education. So we look at the human side of education, and we're mindful that it is identity, and that where students are, and we're always with students on their journey. So the first leg of the journey, I suppose, is on developing friendships. Our DARE students, and those who enter through the disability access route, have individual appointments with staff so that their needs are met very quickly when they arrive on campus. And of course, our mature students attend transition workshops. These are maths workshops, note-taking, academic writing, referencing, and we just don't make them up. We don't decide, oh, these are the workshops that will suit mature students. We ask them. We ask the mature students officer, asks mature students, once they accept their offer, what is it that you want? What will help you to make this transition to university? And of course, orientation and registration. All our students are invited to orientation. They attend in small groups. So for example, if a group of 50 students in applied psychology attend one day, those 50 students are divided up into smaller groups, 25 students each. They're assigned peer support leaders. They're given tours of campus, and they're with their peer support leaders all day, and those peer support leaders are their peer support leaders for the duration of first year. And once the day is completed, those students return to campus that evening for activities organised by the Students' Union and their peer support leaders. They're very well attended. Up to 5 students of an evening would attend those social events. And then the Freshers' Fest, it's the final event before students start the academic year. This is on a Saturday also. Over 2,000 students attended last year, and they attend, it's almost like a carnival day on campus. They attend workshops, academic workshops, life skills workshops. They're also invited by the Students' Union that evening to a disorientation party. So after all the hard work of orientating them before they arrive, they are disorientated by the Students' Union just before they land on campus. So we work very hard before they arrive on campus. And then when students get to campus, we organise, again I'm trying to move on, we organise a live Q&A session because we realise that they have many questions once they start their lectures. So a real-time Q&A session takes quite a lot of work because naturally if you're hosting this event you need to be prepared. That means, you know, having a fair idea of the type of questions that students might be asking and having the answers available very quickly. And making real-time Q&A sessions a regular routine fosters community and loyalty among students. And these sessions, of course, can be archived, and it's almost like, you know, having a live Q&A for students. So that is a very important initiative, and many of our students engage on that, and their questions, again, as I said, are answered very quickly. Okay, and that's just the social media. We engage with students, I suppose, at the beginning of their leaving cert, we start engaging with them, telling them we're with them, we're counting down the days. If they have a bad paper, you know, we talk about that. So we start engagement, and I think it's key for us. We start engagement very early. Through exit interviews, okay, I'm just sorry about this. So another change that we implemented through the exit interviews was the change of course initiative. And you know, when students attend, every student actually who wants to withdraw from their program attends an exit interview. And the exit interview has, you know, a twofold benefit. It helps students in you know, advising them about their options and, you know, looking at maybe other courses they can apply for the following year, and maybe they can join our Flexi Option program. But also it gives the university information on why the student wants to leave in the first place. And the information that I gathered since 2007, I suppose I realised that in evaluating that data and producing reports to Academic Board and Council, that many of our first-year students were leaving because they had chosen the wrong program. And that's not new, like people sort of know that already from their own research. But what we realised was that students on high points, mostly it was high point students, were leaving their course because they had chosen the wrong degree program. So I asked I put a proposal together and asked that it be approved that we allow students to change their course within the first 3 weeks. Of course, there was a lot of buy-in from stakeholders, especially the academic community, because they had to put extra supports in place so that these students could catch up. And we see a direct correlation now between, you know, the numbers who change course and retention rates. Okay, so some observations. I suppose 98% of our students attend orientation, which is quite good. I think when I started in 2007 in this post, we had just over 70% attending orientation. So that is good. And when I talk about orientation, I'm also including, I suppose, Faulty Fest activities. Our first-year retention rate has improved from 89% to 91%, and we see a direct correlation between the change of course and improved retention rates. 118 students changed course in the first 3 weeks this year. And I'm just going to ask Tony to play a video there on student feedback after the fest. Thanks, Tony. Does that play?
Press your talk button.
I suppose it's just not enough for me to tell you that what we're doing actually works, but to hear it from students is very important. So finally, I just want to say that we must continue to repeat what works and continue to seek feedback from our students and to listen to their voices, because they are the ones who will tell us what's working for them. So thank you very much again for this opportunity and for listening.
Noreen, thanks very much. Way to go. I mean, how do I follow Aristotle? I mean, that's a big ask. But I do. I particularly like that, and I like the thing about the video there about the student voice. And I think if there's one thing which is coming through from all the presenters this morning is the importance of the student voice, because when all is said and done, that's what our business is, and they are our core customers. And as I said, if we don't get that right, then what are we actually doing, and what are we all about? And I suppose it begs some questions. And what do we mean by effectiveness and efficiency? Does effectiveness and efficiency mean from the college's perspective or from the student's perspective? So I suppose that just raises some interesting issues there. I liked your quote there that they're emerging adults. As the father of a 19 and 20-year-old student, mm-hmm. I can fully agree with that particular sentiment. So we're going to stay now in the second city, although some might say the real capital. So we're just going to move briefly slightly west of the city now, from UCC into Cork Institute of Technology, where we have Maurice Birmingham. She's the head of Strategic Student Engagement and Retention Initiative since its inception in September 2012. And since November last year has been tasked to head up CIT's Teaching and Learning Unit. She's worked in CIT since 1992, where she's previously head of the Educational Opportunities Department with responsibility for the early development of CIT's wider access programme, which has led to several European projects that focus on widening access to HE by underrepresented groups. And all of those projects were successfully mainstreamed and were the forerunners of CIT's current access initiative. So I suppose the importance that, sometimes we might feel our pilot's actually going to get somewhere. Well, certainly the work that Maurice has done would certainly indicate that it has certainly been mainstreamed. Some of the programs were selected as models of best practice in Europe, and were also recognised at a national level as award winners. Maurice has previously served as VP of the European Access Network and is currently CIT's representative on the Learning Innovation Network and one of CIT's designated contacts on the National Forum for the Enhancement of Teaching and Learning in Higher Education, who are the sponsors of today's webinar. So I will now say bienvenue or hello or Céad Míle Fáilte to Maurice. Are you there? And I'll now knock off my video and talk button.
Céad Míle Fáilte, Tom. It wasn't Aristotle I was worried about at all, to be honest with you. It was Liz and Sean and Carpenter there in Carlow, Dermot and Carlow, and Noreen down the road in UCC. I think we can give Aristotle a run for his money. I think, and there's a few more I think to come when she comes in. Laura Keane from Waterford. First of all, can I just say welcome to CIT and thank you for giving us this opportunity to present again in a space that we are very passionate about. And it's nice to be able to share, I think, with practitioners who share our passion as well. I think the conversation at the end will be very worthwhile. So maybe just, I think in this presentation today, I would like to tell you a little bit about the story maybe for the last 2 years of the CIT Strategic Student Engagement and Retention Initiative. And that's a long one, and now with the other title added, somebody joked here the other day that I might have the longest business card in the history of CIT, so we're going to have to look at that down the line. I take it that you're hearing me loud and clear, are you? I think I have a couple of fans there saying hello to me on chat, so that's good. So anyway, maybe just to go back a little bit, as you said, Tom, CIT have been concerned about how we might improve student engagement and retention for a long time. It's getting, there are lots of reasons to be concerned about it. It's getting a lot of national coverage as well. Internationally, we need to be looking at not just, let's say, for want of a better word, massification of higher education, but also the outputs and what we're doing to ensure that we get the best possible success opportunities to provide them for very diverse and challenging maybe groups of students coming through higher education nowadays, and great students one and all. When we were looking at this, and the CIT we're lucky is very, I think, has shown this committed to this area by dedicating resources. I wouldn't like to say it's lucky that it has me, but it's lucky that we're lucky that we have dedicated resources to establish something that perhaps can aim at least to follow some of the values and principles of the What Works, which we seriously looked at back in September when we were trying to establish what this initiative might mean. And as a working kind of, if you like, mission statement or value, the focus of CIT, Strategic Student Engagement Initiative, is to work with academic faculty, school and department staff in cooperation with Central Student Services to review best practices to date, explore current issues, develop proactive and collaborative strategies appropriate to need, and facilitate implementation. So in order just to give you a little bit of background, I might just walk you through the kind of, if you like, just some of maybe the initiatives that we have been developing, because when we came on board to do this, it's you want to get something up and running fairly fast, because the group of students that are in September 2012, there were over 2,000 first-year students had signed in. So we were looking at how do we get something moving pretty quickly. And there were things already, many things happening in the college. So we weren't just waiting for an initiative like this. There was already lots of good work happening within the academic departments, and indeed through areas like the Academic Learning Centre. And the Academic Learning Centre was then transferred over to the management of the Student Engagement Retention Initiative. And we also wanted to hear what have the students to say about all of that. All of that should be informed. Anything that we're going to do here, it should be informed by not just the students, but not just the staff, but the students also. One of the first things that we did on looking at what works is to say, well, all right, that first 6 weeks seems to be important. So just to look at that Good Start program there for a minute, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this one because I'm just trying to get one of those little tabs now. I did this yesterday and it worked for me, and everybody else seems to be able to use them. Here you go. The Good Start. So we're building this brick by brick, really, and it was important to get, and of course it's a challenge here, and Liz alluded to this earlier, that we build initiatives and we don't necessarily maybe measure what they're doing, but there has been a lot of research done in the UK and in the US. So it's not a flash in the pan kind of thing that we were doing. We read, we did the desk research, as Noreen has been doing, as Anne Carpenter, as Dermot, as all of us practitioners are doing. We're looking at what's happening outside of the country, and where people are maybe 10 years ahead of us. So we don't need to go back and learn those lessons, I think, from the beginning again. And let's just take some of those things and instead of, as I say, going back to the beginning, simply adopt and adapt them to suit our own circumstances here in CIT. So we looked at the first 7 weeks program actually in UL, but we also are looking at all of the stuff that's into Michelle Morgan, Liz Thomas herself actually, all of the stuff that's been done already. We could see that the first 6 weeks was something that we could immediately get something going on. in order to understand what a student engagement and retention initiative might be, and I need to go back a little bit, I omitted to say this, we ran quite a number of staff focus groups and student focus groups to understand what people, they themselves saw as what we might be doing in this job. And I think that was really important. And that has paid huge dividends for us, that we do that all the time. And we work collaboratively, we work in cooperation, we work in partnership is what we're hoping to do, to work with the academic departments, to work with students, to identify what is working and then to do more of it and to see if we can get some results. So the Good Start program, I'm going to talk about that a little bit later on. It's essentially, and how that has developed when we have done the review of it. Moving then to the department-led initiatives and transitions, out of that, we've always been looking at how can we get our reach to extend to more students. So it's really important that we could get the academic home unit involved, because that is, after all, where the student meets the institute. And if we're going to be student-centric, then we have also got to be academic department-centric too, because our lecturers, who are under increasing pressures with hours and large teaching hours and loads and so on, they become very key to any work that we would do. That leads us into a place where we have done quite a number of professional development workshops and seminars to inform what we're doing and to inform and to get ready the ground for some of the things that we were hoping to do, let's say, in 2013, 2014. I'll come back to talk to you about the Just Ask campaign. It's just something in there that we have developed over the last while. And we also here in CIT have a CIT module, CIT being creativity, innovation and teamwork. All first-year students must take that for the first semester, and I think there's going to be some discussion later on, at least I understood from the brief on this webinar, around the notion of learning to learn modules. And that CIT module has that. It's an academic induction module. But we have been looking at that because, strangely enough, those kinds of modules can come under pressure from students who don't necessarily see the value of them. And I think we need to look at what students expect from learning to learn or creativity, innovation, teamwork modules, which is essentially, as far as we're concerned, we see that we want to grow our students as independent, able, prepared learners. But sometimes our students, when they come in, they don't necessarily value that one, and we've got to look at it. So in order to look at that, one of the first jobs we did around it, because this is a huge opportunity, the Learn to Learn CIT module, there's 3 hours a week there with first-year students. We have formed community of practice, and we have done a first review of the CIT module scripter. And in the summer of 2013, having started this job in September 2012, we decided we would put a repository of materials up onto our staff gateway for staff, addressing academic induction and preparedness for college and all of those kinds of things, and that has been quite a useful thing. But again, as somebody once said, and I'm not sure that I would be in the same room as this person, but much done, much more to do, I think, in that space. We're currently developing an academic advising model where we're working collaboratively with a number of departments, following students live. And the notion there is that once 2 red flags go up, that could be around attendance, maybe not handing in work, there can be, those engagement measures will be defined actually as we do more work in this space, and they may very well differ for different departments. We are getting names back in from students that departments are concerned about, and we're making phone calls to them, and we're doing very supportive work in that space, offering students an opportunity to meet somebody, to look at how they're getting on if we feel that's necessary. Very often I have to say that the work we have done there is light touch, and the phone call from a student engagement and retention initiative can very often be enough to get a student back on track. I can only, in a 15-minute webinar, maybe touch on some of these things. There's a lot more to be said than one can cover in a broad brush stroke on a morning like this. But again, just for anybody who wants to talk to you about any of these things, you can come back to us again at the discussion level or indeed any time after this webinar. The PALS initiative is just something that we've started this year. I know it's been operating in a number of colleges for a number of years now, both nationally and internationally. But CIT has introduced PALS in a very significant way since last September. And that is our peer-assisted learning and support program. And again, this is something that our students asked for, and I think it's something that we have delivered on. Just bear with me now, let's see what's coming next. Oh yes, this now is hot off the press. You know, I have been around with all of my colleagues around nationally here. They've heard me say, you know, that sometimes we people in jobs like this, we're asked very often for metrics to prove that what we're doing is working. And I have been heard to say at many a forum now, you know, that we need to hold our nerve, because when you start work in this space, it takes a little bit of time to actually get some results. But since day one, we have been very mindful of the need to make sure that what we're doing is working. So with this webinar coming up, and I'd have to say thanks to Noel, Tom and Tony and everybody who said this was a good idea, because I wasn't sure about it when we had to do the work. But what it did mean was that we went back into our IT services here to Tom Roach, who has been developing a dashboard to allow us to pick up statistics on what is happening with all of our students in an easier way. And I said, Tom, is there anything at all that you can give me, any straw that we can throw into the wind at all to see if we're going in the right direction? And so this is a draft thing that I'm presenting with Tom's permission and with the permission of the registrar, that we can just show you a couple of slides of something that I was handed the day before yesterday. And essentially what Tom did was he said, well, you've been doing a lot of work in first year, so maybe we'll just look at the let's say the bottom quartile, or the bottom, and that's not a good word, bottom, but the quartile of students, the 25% of students in first year across business and humanities and engineering and science who have come into CIT over the last number of years on the lowest points. And let's have a look at what's happening there. And I think that this, you know, that if we look at a student engagement and retention initiative starting in 2012, I think these slides indicate that there is something here, and they seem to be encouraging. And maybe that's as much as we could say about that. Maybe we can't draw any really big conclusions. I'd be slow to do that. This is something that tells us that we are moving in the right direction. And I think this particular slide here is interesting, because we're also talking about success. So this one to me is encouraging. When I saw these, I said to Tom, you know, are we comparing like with like here? I mean, there's always a worry when you do this sort of stuff, and there are lots of questions around it. Are we comparing? Did the points change? What changed here to have this kind of an? When I look at these, I think I see, and I need to go back and look at this, about an 8% improvement, maybe a 10% improvement over the last 3 years in some of the metrics. But Tom pulled another slide then for me, and he said, here, you know, there's the you know, we're looking at a similar kind of CAO point average. Now, I know that this doesn't necessarily take into account, let's say, our mature students or whatever, but I think there's something in this that tells us we are moving in the right direction. So the title of our content today was just simply, they said we did, trying and testing transition initiatives in CIT. So everything that we're doing this all of the time, reviewing each of the actions that we take. So in 2012, as I alluded to earlier, we did the desk research, as Noreen has outlined, the what works, they so on. But we also did quite a bit of very purposeful conversations through focus groups, meetings with senior staff, meetings with deans of faculty, heads of schools, student union representatives, and focus groups with students. And that allowed us to peg out some of the areas that students were and staff were interested in. And the first 6 weeks came back all the time. It's get them early. It was in those kinds of conversations. We need to ensure that our students are inducted early. We need to manage their expectations. We need to talk to them about what it is to be a higher education student. They also wanted very clearly for us to build collaborative relationships with academic departments, schools and faculties. The departments don't want a bolt-on initiative. We are not here to police what people are doing, we're here to support, and we've been very clear about that. And while we may need to look at, let's say, challenging modules and the kinds of areas that we need to target and focus on, if we don't do that with the departments at the table with us, then I'm afraid we're not going to have the kinds of effects that I think that we're beginning to show. The staff development piece is very important because, again, you can ask questions of people, but unless you give context and opportunity for us to look at the possibilities, then it's very difficult, I think, for us all to imagine from a no-start place if you haven't actually been exposed to some of the research and some of the thinking. And it's very difficult for us to make some sort of, let's say, informed decision about where to go next. So we've been putting a bit of work into that, and perhaps now wearing the teaching and learning unit hat, then we'll see a little more of this coming up too. I'll just wet my whistle now. The Good Start Programme 2013, I'll speak about something in particular here just for a minute to give you some sense of how we worked that and what is happening. We ran that in having started the initiative in 2012. We wanted to get something happening that was going to be high vis, and I work off the basis that if we have focus groups with staff and students, then we need to be absolutely seen to be bringing something back to the table. So one of the clear areas in 2012, as a result of all of that research, was that people were saying to us about the first 6 weeks. So we started to imagine what a Good Start programme would look like, and we did the research and we pulled a number of discussion documents together, presented them to students and to staff, and took some soundings. And in May of 2013, a decision was made when documents had gone to IAB that perhaps CIT should now go ahead and start and run what we were proposing to be a Good Start programme in September 2013. So there we were with a couple of months to go, and we brought on a group of students, and this has been really, really important to us, and I think it's something that we will continue and have continued this year, to bring a group of students in to work with us over the summer to develop what Good Start would be. So we pulled all the themes, we showed them where to look, we put them into a room, we gave them flip charts, sheets and pens, and we said we'd like maybe a first sort of look at the first 6 or 7 weeks of term. Tell us what it is you think you need there. We could also present them with what the students had said at previous focus groups and indeed what staff were saying. And this is, I think I said this in the previous webinar, this was a little bit of ready, fire, aim instead of ready, aim, fire, because sometimes you push things off a cliff and you go with them a little bit, and the learning that comes out of that is so rich that very quickly we get to a place where you have something that is developing into a much bigger and better program. To review that, we did interviews and surveys. We had responses from over 300 students with really constructive suggestions for improvement. I went through this at a previous webinar, but the kinds of things that students said to us, and they've informed what we're doing next, is could we have more stuff at class level, please? So this is our 2013 programme. What did we do? Over the course of April 2014, in that academic year 13-14, we put out a call to all of our academic departments and central service units and asked would anybody be interested in running a transition to CIT project in their own department, given what they know about their own students and the issues that they're we had a huge response to that, with small amount of money offered to support. And in fact, what is interesting is that we, having run 25 school department central service-led transition to CIT projects this September as part of our Good Start 2014 programme, most of those departments, and I'm afraid to say this almost in webinar in case the claims will come in, they actually were able to resource that from their own budgets. So not everybody came back looking for the money. And by doing that kind of thing, we get a quick win, if you like, and departments know that we are supportive. We get to talk about the kind of things that they were doing, and it opens up discussion and partnership. And we are currently working with faculties, moving towards a place where we will have faculty-specific plans for improving student engagement and retention activities. Another thing our students and our staff said, could we have more information points and more visibility? I'm speaking with somebody from UL the other day. They were saying, that the UL program, and Sarah Moore would say this herself, that after 3 years of the first 7 weeks program in UL, that there's a danger that things become part of the, if you like, the furniture, and they're maybe not seen anymore. We thought we had a highly visible program in 2013, but for sure this year I think we have really added to that. And while 13 was great, 14 has been fantastic, and we've done a Just Ask campaign. So I can just show you some of the kind of stuff that we're doing there. There's posters, a poster campaign, we had photo cutouts, banners and bunting around the college, and we created a big welcome mat. The Just Ask desks were a simple idea, but a very effective one, where we had pop-up desks on wheels. All right, it costs a little bit of money to get those, but not huge money in the context of let's say the income that one can have if a student decides to stay for 4 years in the institute. Then but these little desks here with students who are well trained are popping up around the campus at various times as issues arise for students. So we have developed that further. Would start, interestingly, is becoming a brand or stamp for our first year experience. And we have just completed this Monday our Good Start Semester 2 program, which was really about asking about exams and encouraging people to get back down to study in Semester 2 and not to panic if their Semester 1 results weren't quite what they should have been, and that there are lots and lots of support available out there. Such as even the Academic Learning Centre and the Careers and Counselling Service, all of those things that you all have in your colleges. But it's getting the students to make the connection with that, actually, to become self-determining. And I think I made a comment earlier there on the chat box that some of our big challenge would be around, and the terminology is strange, but maybe it's passive failing students who are perhaps not reaching their potential, but do not have the confidence, the wherewithal to make the connections to the systems that will help them to achieve success. I think this type of campaign can really work in that space where you have student-led, student-to-student project, student leaders understanding and buying into the notion that we are here to try and make as many successes as possible out of our incoming students. Another thing that was asked for was buddy systems would be great, and we've had lots of buddy systems in the college in various ways, lots of really good dots. We have, I'm over time, am I, Tom? All right, I'll finish on that, sorry. We have launch pals in CIT since September.
Sorry, I didn't mean that quickly, sorry.
Yeah. Everybody put me off. Have you given me a minute?
Yep, no,
Well, I'm coming to the end.
No,
sorry.
please do. I
suffer from enthusiasm.
Take a minute, just finish what you want to say, sorry.
We can come back and talk about this. This year we're getting a huge amount of feedback to the work that we've done. We've interviewed all the students who filled withdrawal forms over the summer. We're currently talking to students who before were catching them live, as it were, as they're starting to show signs of disengagement. Those conversations are throwing up lots of really useful information that will inform how we develop an early alert and intervention scheme that will start in day one and maybe pre-day day one of next year's, so 2015-16, we'll see lots of new things happening. And I was just going to flash that slide back up there again, because maybe we're just simply saying this is encouraging, and it's good for us because we've been really pushed. My team, Roshi and O'Grady, who's our new Student Engagement and Retention Officer, will join the conversation later on. Joy Collins, who's running the Academic Learning Centre. Barbara Hempel, who is the PALS Coordinator. All of these posts well, the Academic Learning Centre was there already, but these people are coming on board. The college is showing that it's willing to put in resources. This type of information is important then to say to senior management, yes, initiatives like this could ultimately be self-financing.
Thanks, Marie.
Thank you.
Thanks, Marie. No, and it's very...
That's all right, Tom. Maybe I don't.
No.
Maybe I don't do short
I just
talks,
want to compliment some very, very interesting stuff there, and I think it's very evident there that there's a real concern for student involvement and student engagement. So just we're going to now leave Cork, and we're now going to head to Waterford Institute of Technology, where we have Laura Keane, who is the head of Student Life and Learning Unit there in the sunny southeast. So I'm just going to invite you on board now. So I think I can hear you in the background, and I'm now going to switch off my video and talk button and welcome Laura from WIT, and it's at Ashling there as well. So I'm going to hand over.
Thanks very much. Greetings from WIT. I'm Laura Keane, Head of Student Life and Learning, and this is my colleague Ashling O'Toole, the Student Retention Officer here in the Institute. And I'm very conscious of time and the time that people have to commit to this, so I will try to keep it within the limits if I can. I'm just going to, we've had problems with how the PowerPoint looks, and I just want to, okay, it's looking fine there now. A very recent version of it had to be submitted late. But I suppose today I'm going to talk about one small piece of the puzzle and looking at specific student cohort that we try to look at their transition and how we try to facilitate that and help that through working on a pre-entry programme. Before I do that, just an overview of our department. Student Life and Learning comprises of a number of services here within the Institute, and we have two main aims, and that is to make the Institute more accessible to those who have traditionally not been able to access higher education, specifically those from socioeconomic disadvantage, early school leavers, mature students, ethnic minorities and students with a disability. And our second aim is to improve the retention and success of all students within the Institute in a range of ways, with a particular emphasis that we have on first-year students and the transition. So in doing that, I suppose we're a department that deals very closely with students on a one-to-one basis, as well as with the academic departments, and we have a role looking at the academic and the social integration and belonging within an institution. And I suppose looking specifically at some of our in the area of retention, we have a range of programs, including, as many of the other institutes are doing, looking at our induction, our orientation, social media, peer mentoring, early intervention programs, warning signs, different programs that we run. But today, as I said, I'm going to talk about one specific piece of the puzzle, which is our mature student summer school. That has been running in WIT since 1996. So we're in our 20th iteration of it this year. The programme is tailored for adults who are considering returning to full-time education. And I suppose the reason that I'm talking about that is I want to highlight the importance of managing student expectations. And mature students are a group that we have, and I think Noreen mentioned earlier, that the short time frame that we have traditionally with students coming from the CAO between the acceptance of their place and when they start. In this institute, we have less than a week between registration and when they accept their place. So there's very little room for pre-entry work. So we looked at this group and how we could work with them. This originally began as an access programme and looking at, I suppose, widening participation and increasing numbers of mature students, it has very quickly over the years devolved into an access and a retention strategy, looking at how we can help the transition of this group. It has evolved, I suppose, particularly because of the student voice in the feedback that they give us around this programme, and also what we learn from when Ashton conducts exit interviews, what we hear from other feedback that we conduct, and this is how this programme has evolved into what it is today. We try to give a realistic impression of, I suppose, the demands and what being in higher education will involve. And we try to do that as much as possible from the perspective of students, and students are very heavily involved in helping us run and deliver this programme. There's a brief outline of the workshops that we run there. I'm not going to go into big detail, but I suppose, again, all of these have developed because of the needs and the confusion that we see that students, mature students, can experience around these issues, particularly in the first few weeks in the Institute. And I suppose what is rated very highly is the fact that guidance, and we work closely with the Regional Educational Guidance Service for Adults to help students make informed decisions. And also it is the idea of financial support and maybe putting students at ease around and getting as much information as possible around their grants, back to education, social welfare payments, and how they all work. Again, from the agencies involved and also from the students who found those difficulties when they were trying to transition. We also try to give as much information around the programme content, and we involve the academic departments and academic staff in coming in and talking to the students and having questions and answer sessions. I'm not sure if I'm leaving anything out. I suppose, again, we've developed this programme from what we hear in feedback from the students that participate, from our students in the Institute, and particularly from the student leaders who helped us to design this programme. I suppose why I chose a pre-entry initiative is that, like any other HEI, there's an increasingly diverse set of learners in our institutions, including some of the part-time, distance education, springboard, international students. And what we find here is that the transition is not the same for everybody, and that one-size-fits-all approach is not appropriate. Early engagement is important, as we all know, and this is a group that we can engage with early, and providing the opportunity to hear from their peers is extremely important. And again, we can facilitate this with this group. I suppose we looked across a range of best practice, including what works. And if I go back to the BC Gunter strategy model, they talk of sorting as being one of the groups, and how working with pre-entry can help the transition and retention of students, particularly around the managing expectations, and also how it helps us develop a sense of belonging early for those students. Measurement, I suppose, and one of the things that we're here to talk about today. I'm very much on the side of qualitative feedback and how that can help us, but yet I realise that I have to bring a quantitative element to this for the discussions that I have around making the cases for the programmes that we run, and for, as it were, justifying their existence. From the qualitative pieces, we rely heavily on feedback through interviews, through the questionnaires that we hand out after our programmes, and from the individual meetings that we have with students and focus groups. You can see some of the reasons there that people gave for participating in the programme. One there that I suppose spoke to me is that I am more prepared to return to education and learning than I had thought, and that I was mentally and practically able to do so and ready. And that is a very big, I suppose, piece of the transition, that students are confident enough in their ability, and that you can help them gain that confidence. Again, a range of quotes that the participants said around this after participation session in the program. Nothing is impossible. Keep focused on what you decide to do. We do keep statistics around this. Again, I stress that the program has evolved much more so from the qualitative feedback that we receive. From an institute perspective, I suppose it's important that I can show evidence around progression into the institute and into programs from the attendees, and the other types of that we measure include questionnaires, the individual meetings, and then we look at the semester 1 exam results for the cohort, the semester 2 exam results, progression into year 2. But again, I stress what's been very important for us is the feedback and the qualitative piece on this. That's about it in a nutshell. I just have both of our email addresses there if anybody wants to contact us afterwards. I think I came in under the 15 minutes. And I suppose just to say thank you for the opportunity to highlight what we know is we all have the same interest at heart. We're all looking to promote student success, help the transition, and we're all very aware of the challenges that face students and working together on how we can not reinvent the wheel but actually come together to try and build our expertise. And I suppose that's what events like this give us the opportunity to do. So thank you to Noel and the others for organising this. And if anybody has any questions afterwards, the email address is from myself.
Thank you very much. You actually get a gold star for your time, I think to say, and you've raised some very important issues, and certainly something which as you see here from the quote I put in the text box here, your emphasis on qualitative research, I think is very important. But I think you also do recognise that when you're dealing with the bean counter, so to speak, they will often be people who understand, for them, evidence is a more positivistic understanding of evidence in terms of numbers that can be crunched and sort of, you know, so for that counts as evidence. And yet, as I said, if we're genuinely interested in student engagement, it needs a combination of both. As I said, even the large scale ISI survey still has the open responses as well, like that. You know, so as I said, everybody's trying to get some level of involvement. We are quite pushed for time, to say the least, but if people are happy, I think, you know, that we might sort of run till about 12:15 or thereabouts, if people are happy enough. I just think it's important. You know, we've had some really good presentations all day, and some really thought-provoking. And the first thing that we wanted to do was just to re-invite Liz to come back in and just maybe just give us some thoughts or observations, and to maybe lead things off from there. And as I said, you know, if people haven't been using the chat room hitherto, I'd really encourage people to maybe just throw up some questions, and I'll do my level best to try and funnel them into discussion. So Liz, if you are there, we'll just bring you back in on any thoughts or observations that you wanted to just take from this morning. And you're back on. I think you just need to click on your talk button. So just click on the talk button. I can see you, but I can't hear you. So the talk button. No.
There, better. I've switched the microphone on as well.
Perfect.
Better?
Yeah. Hello. Okay.
Okay, thank you. I have a whole sheet here of notes and things, and very quickly picking some things out. I think the concept of success is really important that Anne mentioned from IT Carlo, that I think one of the issues about engaging staff and institutions is not just to focus on perhaps the lower quartile, which Maurice was talking about, but also the concept of success allows us to think about how all students maximise their success, and I think that's really important part of all the work that we want to do. Transition presumably is not just about stopping dropout. but it's a much more positive kind of thing. And I think what all the conversations have shown is that we need a wide range of indicators, that it's certainly not just about measuring dropout or non-continuation or whatever kind of language and terminology we choose to use, but we need a whole range of indicators, and we need to use a whole range of methods. I think it's really exciting that you've got the Irish Survey of Student Engagement available to you, and a really helpful kind of tour on how you might start to use that. And I think what we were kind of looking at in the chat was about how you use that sort of information or any kind of statistical data as kind of an indication of some of the issues that might be going on, and then you can explore it through qualitative work with both staff and students that helps you to understand why and how things might be changed and moved on. So I think the kind of the range of indicators and the methods used need to be mixed. And then Maurice talked about the concept of partnership working, and I think that's a really important thing that runs through a lot of the work. So the fact that we need to work collaboratively with academic staff, and we need to work with service staff, and I would suggest we need to think about how we involve students in that process of change more. And at Waterford, there was some really interesting kind of use of qualitative evidence from the student voice, and I think all of that might contribute to understanding how you take things forward further, but also perhaps how you create your more qualitative or softer indicators that help to move things on. So I think I've picked up something from everybody's talk there, but I apologise if I haven't. And I think there's a huge number of things which we could pick up, so thank you very much.
Thanks very much. Thanks very much, Liz. Ger, we're just going to come back here, and I just wanted to bring in Sean if he was happy to just come back in, and I just wanted to just pose one or two issues there. So I'm just sort of check if Sean is on board. There he is there like that. Yeah, and just picking up on the point there, Liz was saying like the range of indicators there. Do you see that your indices are obviously arranged into sort of groups? Do you see is anyone being more important, or do you think that's depending on your role, if you're an administrator, an educator, a registrar, or do you see, is there any particular group of indices which do you think is the most useful?
Thanks, Tom. I think very much it actually does depend on the context of the local institution. And one of the things we've been very careful with the national project is to try to avoid external interpretation of institution level data. So there are some key issues identified in the national report, and the report from November, the results-based report, includes chapter 6, which goes through in significant detail 2 of the specific indices. Now, to be honest, the 2 indices were chosen as an example of some of the interpretation and analysis that can be undertaken locally, but they were chosen because they're not particularly giving away hostages to fortune, or issues that are particularly sensitive or could be picked up externally and cause problems there. I think in terms of the data files specifically, if we talk about the larger data file, then the report file there literally is a single page within that actually will satisfy many of the senior personnel within institutions, because you can look at your own institution in the national picture and in practically every single case be reassured we're not significantly out of step. Therefore, we don't need to worry, and we can move on with a degree of comfort into an analysis of more detailed levels of the data. At that point, for the average member of staff within an institution, I would suggest go to what we call the index file. So you're talking about a single page in many instances. If you're interested specifically in active learning, are you specifically interested in student-staff interaction or supportive learning environment, there is a single page within the data that actually allows you just to look at what did your students tell you in response to those particular questions. So really I would echo yet again what I've said this morning a couple of times. accept there's a lot of data there, but have the confidence to go and find the one bit that allows you to begin to engage with it and look at what your own students.
Thanks very much, Sean, on that. I suppose just kind of keep things maybe in sequence. I was just actually going to call on the earlier presenters just in the sequence that they presented. So if Anne was there now, she's been handed moderator privileges here, and I just wanted to just pose. So I can see you there, and you just highlighted one particular project there, and there's obviously a lot of sort of staff involvement in terms of tutoring hours. Is there any other sort of similar projects, and you know, in terms of getting the student or the staff resources, would you see that as one of the major challenges? I'm just looking at some of the challenges that Liz sort of highlighted earlier in terms of in her conclusion slide like that. So what would you sort of see are the challenges of rolling out similar projects in your college or just in colleges in general?
Well, Tom, our first slide highlighted that there are a range of initiatives here in IT Carlow, and we focus, I suppose, particularly on that whole. Can you hear me?
Yes, yeah, can hear you.
Yeah. We focus particularly, I suppose, on this whole area. I think of the academic support and the engagement of the learners in the classroom, and also in relation to the notion of monitoring, systematic monitoring, and feedback to the learners. And I suppose that there were sort of two key areas that we are focusing on. And I think it goes back to Tinto's argument that where most of our students are engaged is in the classroom. And we need to look at that in terms of teaching and learning, in terms of assessment, in terms of feedback, and in terms of academic support.
Okay. Hello, sorry, we seem to have an issue here. I don't know if somebody's pressing all buttons here. All the slides seem to be jumping on board. So, listen, thanks very much for that. Sorry, I got a little bit of a problem there. So, thanks very much for that. The next person we're just going to move now is to Noreen in UCC, and just one sort of thing here that I thought you sort of brought on quite well. I love the point that you made that about the human side of education, and you think that that is sometimes forgotten about. I suppose just in terms of thinking about the debate here about effectiveness and efficiency. Does that mean different things to possibly the administrator and to the student?
I think that it's very important, you know, if we take into consideration the theories of human development and where students are at in their lives when they arrive on our campuses, that, you know, they're full of excitement, they're in that liminal space, they're, you know, they're anxious, they're stressed, and we start giving them lots of information, you know, instead of chunking it up, you know, throughout the first semester maybe, and give it to them, you know, when they need it. And it's a very simple thing to do. You know, we shouldn't be too anxious, I think, to overload them initially. You know, from the research that I've completed over the last number of years, it's very simple what students want initially, and we have to get that right because nothing else will work if it's not right. They have to feel that they belong on our campuses. They have to feel that they can make friends, that they're comfortable on campus, and if we don't get that right from the start, then it's very hard to get everything else right. So we concentrate initially on the human side of education because it is very important from the majority of our students.
Thanks very much, and I certainly agree with that. Just the next person I'm just going to draw in is Maurice back in CIT, and I just wanted to pose a question, a point that I picked up here, that she said, you know, just about the need to balancing the student and staff considerations. I suppose, you know, do we need to, I suppose, if you think about, it's all very well to gather the data. I just see Roisin joining you. You're very welcome, Roisin.
Okay.
I just think, is there sometimes an issue where we have all this data, but how effectively can we respond to that? I mean, by setting up, are we setting up unrealistic expectations amongst students? I would just pose the question.
I don't think so. Not at all. I think it's the whole. There's no way that any student engagement or retention, in my opinion, can have the reach that we need to have if we don't have real partnership between students and staff. Our students experience in the main, and I agree with everything that Noreen and all of the other speakers have said. Actually, the whole human dimension is hugely important, but that human dimension also happens within the classroom. So I do think that building relationship within the academic sphere will contribute hugely. I don't believe I think we've got to face up to where we're at in terms of, let's say, what students expect maybe, and then what they perhaps experience. And that brings us back, I think, sometimes to looking at how we really do academic induction, and how we create expectation for our students, because as somebody once said, nobody ever rises to a low expectation. And then we've got to, when we have those expectations, I think we've got to put in there how we bring our students to a place where they understand what they are, and how they can best succeed within it. And I often think about a swimming pool, you know, and the pedagogy of sink or swim. And in a way, you know, if we apply that sometimes, and it can feel like that to an incoming student in that transition when they're coming into something that's very different. We've really got to, it's our staff and our partnership programs that will allow us to peg out where the sides of the pool are, where the safety net is, where the life buoy is, who's going to help you to get there, and maybe even down the line show them the diving boards, you know, so we might get them to do some really great stuff at Masters and PhD level when we get them past first year. Is that addressing what you're asking? Would you like to tease that out a bit more, Roisin or Mel? Does that make sense?
Sorry, it does make sense. And as I said, I don't necessarily agree with the question. I just want to pose something to you there. I was acting as an agent provocateur.
Yeah.
Noreen, did you want to come in there? You sort of typed in something there.
No, I just typed in there as Maurice was talking that if engagement doesn't happen in the classroom, that it may never happen for some students, especially for our commuter students. So it is vital that the academic community engage with students within a classroom environment.
Okay, look, Liz, apologies, and sorry for that. I'm aware that we have sort of run over. And Carpenter there, and did you want to just sort of jump in and just talking about agreeing with the transition pedagogy is very important? I don't know if you're still with us. I can see you're obviously with us, but just in terms of the button there. Liz, yes, sorry, did you wanted to just jump in?
I'm talking.
Anne? No, I just wondered if you wanted to come back in. You'll need to speak, press your talk button if you want to talk. Okay, we'll come back to Anne if there's an issue there.
Can I maybe add something there, Tom?
Maurice, yes, jump in. Yep.
Yeah, I think one of the challenges in this space as well around academic induction is there is, and I must say this now with absolute utter respect for the fantastic people that we have working in all of our classrooms across all our institutions, but sometimes I think we've got to really get our head around the level of preparedness or readiness that students have when they come in, and sometimes I think we have an idea that perhaps they're more ready and more prepared than they actually are. And when we run, and I know that there was some talk at a number 4 that I've been involved in about the development of learning to learn modules, and our CIT module fits into that. There's a learning to learn module, I believe, in Athlone and GMIT. I think there might be something in Waterford as well. They exist around the place. But one of the challenges is how we make that important so that it goes up the value chain or up the value curve in the minds of the students themselves, but also in the minds of the staff, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. So listen, I'm just going to now switch back to Waterford. I'm very aware that Aisling and Laura were very, very nice and sort of stuck very much to time, but I just wanted to also, if they wanted to just contribute to the discussion, and then I was going to pose a question to them, but if they feel that if they could just join in there. So just while we're waiting for them, I don't know if they were expecting to come back. I just want to share one thing here with people here. I'm just going to do the share page, and my apologies here. This is, I don't know if people can see this. But this is just a quick, just to give people an indication of where everybody was. So we had Tralee, the two Corks, Waterford, Carlow, Dublin, and Yorkshire. So quite a wide spread. So if anybody ever wonders, how effective we can create sort of communities using online resources, I think that might be just one way of sort of doing it like that. So I'll just return back here to our page like that. Sorry, Liz. I'm just going to come back now to Laura and Aisling for a moment. So I'll just sort of pose a question. You are quite pragmatic in the sense that it's important to you to use qualitative, but you also recognise the importance of making the case with the bean counter, so to speak, in terms of quantitative. How big a challenge is that? And I think it's one of the challenges there that Liz talked about, in terms of designing research tools and clarifying indicators and collecting the data. So how big an issue was it for you to make the case for focus groups and qualitative data?
Can you hear me?
Yeah. I can hear you.
Well, I suppose I didn't make the case because I naturally veer towards the qualitative and use that to inform our program development and our practice. What I found is that that's not enough in some of the conversations that I need to have with others to try and make the case maybe for continuation of programs or maybe resources or different things when it comes to decisions around things. So because of that, I started to look at the quantitative. Now, some of this we were doing ourselves out of our own interest anyway, because we would like to see that if people tell us that, I wouldn't be here only for I did this program, and I'm not talking particularly about the program that I spoke about this morning, but that if we look to say that and we get that feedback from different things, or we look to see, well, did the people progress? And I suppose it's back to, or did they change courses? Because we've been obviously running a change of course for a number of years here as well. Did the people, when they changed the course, for example, stay on that course, or did they leave the institute? And I suppose looking at that really, that I think when you combine them both, the argument that you make is quite strong, and I think even people who like to see the numbers, like to see the money that they're saving, or that they're by doing these things, if you combine the two arguments, it's a very strong force that's hard maybe to disagree with, and I suppose the proof of the pudding, as it were. Would you agree, Aisling?
Yes.
Yeah. So I suppose really, I do it because we have to in a way. Sometimes it's because of a natural interest in what we're doing, and then I think it makes a stronger argument. And it's not that I necessarily agree with the compilation of the quantitative figures, because I don't think they give the depth of the experience, or that they can help inform your programs or your interventions in the way that qualitative data can.
Yes, I think that's always going to be one of the issues there, like that. So Liz had put in a message. I don't know if she wanted to have one final remark. I just wanted to, before I just sort of bring together my own concluding remarks. I'm very aware that we're already 24 minutes over, and people have been very, very good, and we're going to start losing people quite quickly here, like that. So I just wondered, Liz, if you just wanted to make one final comment or anything like that. I don't know if you're having issues with your talk button. I don't know.
It's working now.
Perfect. Yep.
I think it's working now. Yeah. Thank you very much. No, it's been a really informative time, and I think the chat has worked really well as well to share what other people are thinking and a whole set of ideas about how we might take this forward. I mean, what I think it demonstrates is that all the institutions are doing huge amounts of work, and already there's a lot of evidence there, and perhaps the role is about thinking about how this might be brought together to make a stronger case and draw more attention and get wider recognition for all the work that's going on. So, and I was just on the chat, I was just agreeing with these ideas about the human side, and that's what we very much found. It was about relationships rather than about sort of flexibility and choice and lots of things like that. It was about relationships. And just to draw attention to the key words that came out from the UCC students, they talked about finding UCC comfortable, like a big family, and really friendly. And that's what I've always found doing qualitative work with students. It's those things that make a difference to their experience and whether they stay and how successful they are. So I think we mustn't lose the qualitative side, but we need some of this harder evidence to kind of build the case to certain people who want that harder evidence. But I'll tell you, if you give them the hard evidence and you give them individual stories, once you've got the hard evidence, they'll forget that and they'll use the individual stories that highlight the real, the real kind of changes to people's lives that you make. So we do need both. Thank you.
Excellent, and thanks very much, Liz, and indeed to everybody. And I do think, just going back to Sean's, but the ISI survey, is that we now actually have a great opportunity if we take in combination with the data that we're also going to produce ourselves, in each local college, and also have a sort of unique sort of benchmark, and taking in conjunction with those open-ended responses, I think we have a great opportunity, because I think, as I said in your slide, the opportunities and challenge, it's about using it to make a difference. And as I said, that's what it's about. As I said, the human side of education, and I think that it was a lovely remark by Noreen, because it's obviously struck a chord with everybody like that, and as I said, I just put the quote in there. It's been attributed to a number of people, including William Cameron and Albert Einstein, but basically, to paraphrase, everything that matters we can't always count, and everything that counts, or everything that counts we can't always measure, and everything that we can measure doesn't always count. And I suppose by combining qualitative and quantitative, hopefully we will come up with enough hard empirical data which will satisfy those who hold the purse strings, but also those who are charged with delivering education. So taking that in conjunction with the qualitative, that hopefully we will make for a better transition for people into third level education, and hopefully, as I said, they make education at higher level to be as informative and rewarding as possible. And I think, in fairness, just to go back to the National Forum for Teaching and Learning in Higher Education, I think that's one of the great things about this series of webinars. It's given, and seminar series, it's given people that opportunity to come together and to share some of the great work that they're doing. So all it just leaves for me now, finally, just to say a very, very big thank you to the producer who's been in the background here, Tony, who's done so much work in pulling all the stuff together, for Noel Mulligan here in IT Tralee, whose idea this was, and has sort of been the energy behind the whole thing. To all the presenters, they've all been very, very good, very insightful. You've really given me a lot to work with. My job has been made quite easy, but I just want to say that I myself have personally thoroughly enjoyed it, and then I would just like to wish you all, and thanks to all the people who took part as well like that. So, slán go fóill, and thank you very much.